Bro, like my whole computer just took a fucking massive shit and died. I don't know if like my power went out or something, but like everything just crapped out and died. I don't know what the fuck just happened. I think the government's trying to take me out. I have a backup generator, so I don't understand why my computer went out. Like I have a literal backup generator hooked up to my computer, so I don't know why that thing didn't go off and keep my shit from exploding and dying. Oh, my webcam's not even on right now. Yeah, I don't know what the fuck just happened, bro. Now the camera's not working again. There we go.
A low IQ.
Okay. Jesus Christ. Anyway, I was saying it's because, to be honest, what is this? I'm so pissed off the school I chose, and I wish I went for economics instead, and I really want been into about that. I mean, you can like make it a hobby, like study it that way. Finish your degree and then maybe like get something in economics, but use your degree to, I don't know. Fucking, I don't think there's any point in regretting what you're going for. I think you should just finish up and then figure out what you want to do after. Oh shit.
You high school bully, former wannabe football pro, who can't make it with any intellectual skills.
And it is the fucking mafia. This is mafia. The cops are a gang. They're a gang in the commission of the state, but they are a gang nonetheless. They operate identically to a mafia. Identically. And they will fucking kill you. They will roll up on your house like they are a rival gang, and they will perforate the front of your house while civilians flee to get their 8-year-olds out of the line of fire. It is impossible for me to describe the degree to which our society faces oblivion. We face oblivion.
Shit's crazy.
Kyle Rittenhouse crossed state lines and pulled the trigger. But tell me, Vosh, if we care about the sociological and cultural causes of these events, who was responsible? So now we return to the title of the video. Is Vosh evil? Well, according to his moral system, all that matters are outcomes. He has engaged in a horrendous level of bad faith engagement, spread an incredible amount of misinformation, contributed to the dehumanization of half the population, promulgated an incoherent and amoral philosophy, behaved as a reckless authoritarian, and engaged in a serious level of stochastic terrorism. And keep in mind, this video was exclusively focused on Vosh's arguments and actions as a public figure. If we were to dig into his personal life, there are some obvious events that jump to mind that would help support my conclusion. What is the measure of a man-child? You're free to come to your own conclusions, but I feel I've adequately supported mine.
Alright, that was Vouch is unironically evil. I hope that you, dear viewer, have gotten a full idea slash glimpse into why it is I hate Vouch so thoroughly. I hope that this video made it somewhat clear. There's a lot of stuff that wasn't included in this. Debate performances, tweets, interactions with friends, quote unquote. But I hope this helps to elucidate why I hate Vouch so fucking dearly. What do you think, Ed? What do you think, Jones? Mm. We turned an hour-long video into like 7 hours. 6, 7 hours of content. I'd say that's pretty good. What the fuck? How the hell is this little bike able to stop me? Oh my god, this car is fucked. Alright, now... Let's see, what else should we watch? What is all this shit? Oh man. Oh, I really want to watch this. We're gonna watch this. Yeah, we're gonna watch this. I've been wanting to watch this podcast for a hot fucking minute. Alright, this will definitely be the time to interject with random topics if you want, because this is gonna be a long fucking listen. And I don't give a shit and none of you are entertained. I've been itching to watch this fucking podcast.
That's a good point. No, it's a good point.
Now, some people accuse me of speaking very slowly, and they're advised on YouTube to turn up the speed twice to 3 times whenever I'm on. One of the reasons I
Oh, this is gonna be so good. I hate Finkelstein so much. Oh, this is gonna be phenomenal. I'm so excited.
speak slowly is because I attach value to every word I say.
Norm will say this all over and over and over again.
Okay, hold on, wait. Before I really get started, I gotta make something to eat. Hold on. Alright. This is a warning to all of you right now. This is going to be a very long, very dry watch, okay? This is this is 5 hours of fucking content, alright? I got myself my peanut butter sandwich, some milk. Alright, now it's time to rock out.
I only deal in facts. I don't deal in hypotheticals. I only deal in facts. I only deal in facts. And that seems to be the case, except for when the facts are completely and totally contrary to the particular point you're trying to push. The idea that Jews would have out of hand rejected any state that had Arabs on it or always had a plan of expulsion is just betrayed by the acceptance of the 47
I
partition
don't
plan.
think you understand politics.
They forced the British to prevent emigration of Jews from Europe and reaching safe shores in Palestine.
Well,
That's what they did.
And
they knew that the Jews were being persecuted in Europe.
Was Palestine the only spot of land on earth?
Yes, basically that was the problem. The Jews couldn't emigrate anywhere else.
What about your great friends in Britain, the architects of the Balfour Declaration?
By the late 1930s,
what about the United
weren't
States?
happy to take in Jews, and the Americans weren't happy to take in Jews.
And why are Palestinians, who were not Europeans, who had zero role in the rise of Nazism, who had no relation to any of this, why are they somehow uniquely responsible for what happened in Europe and uniquely
to close the only safe haven for Jews?
Professor Morris, because of your logic, and I'm not disputing it, that's why October 7th happened. Oh my God. Because there was no options left for those people.
The Hamas.
Oh, this is going to be so fucking good.
Apart from the attacks on the military sites, when they attacked the kibbutzim, were out to kill civilians, and they killed family after family, house after house.
Talk fast, so people think that you're coherent.
I'm just reading from the UN.
Yeah, but you
I know you like them sometimes, only when they agree with you, though. But you've lied about this
Yeah.
particular instance in the past.
Mr.
Those kids weren't just on the beaches as often stated in articles. Those kids were literally coming out of a previously identified Hamas compound
yeah,
that they
well,
had
that's
operated
soccer
from.
ball.
They literally did.
Mr.
You can Google
Borelli,
it. You can
Mr.
Google
Borelli,
it.
with all
Mr.
due
Finkelstein,
respect,
or-
with all due respect, you're such a fantastic moron. It's terrifying.
Oh, I can't
The
wait.
following is a debate on the topic of Israel and Palestine with Norman Finkelstein, Benny Morris, William Rabani, and Stephen Bunnell, also known online as Destiny. Norm and Benny are historians, Muin is a Middle East analyst, and Stephen is a political commentator and streamer. All four have spoken and debated extensively on this topic. The goal for this debate was not for anyone to win or to score points. It wasn't to get views or likes. I never care about those. And I think there are probably much easier ways to get those things if I did care. The goal was to explore, together, the history, present, and future of Israel and Palestine in a free-flowing conversation. No time limits, no rules. There was a lot of tension in the room from the very beginning, and it only got more intense as we went along. And I quickly realized that this very conversation, in a very real human way, was a microcosm of the tensions and distance and perspectives on the topic of Israel and Palestine. For some debates, I will step in and moderate strictly to prevent emotion from boiling. For this, I saw the value in not interfering with the passion of the exchanges, because that emotion in itself.
Forgot my fucking mic was up. I love Lex, but bro, bullshit. You were excited, bro. You saw them going at it and you thought content, money, money, money. And you know what? He would have been right. This is good content. I can't wait. I'm excited. I've been itching to watch this podcast.
Spoke volumes. We did talk about the history and the future, but the anger, the frustration, the biting wit, and at times respect and camaraderie were all there. Like I said, we did it in an perhaps all too human way. I will do more debates and conversations on these difficult topics, and I will continue to search for hope in the midst of death and destruction, to search for our common humanity in the midst of division and hate. This thing we have going on, human civilization, the whole of it, is beautiful. And it's worth figuring out how we can help it flourish together. I love you all. This is the Lex Friedman podcast. To support it, please check out our sponsors in the description. And now, dear friends, here's Norman Finkelstein, Benny Morris, Muin Rabani, and Stephen Bunnell. First question is about 1948. For Israelis, 1948 is the establishment of the State of Israel and the War of Independence. For Palestinians, 1948 is the Nakba, which means catastrophe, or the displacement of 700,000 Palestinians from their homes as a consequence of the war. What to you is important to understand about the events of 1948 and the period around there, 47, 49, that helps us understand what's going on today and maybe helps us understand the roots of all of this that started even before 1948. I was hoping that Norm could speak first, then Benny, then Wayne, and then Norm.
After World War II, the British decided that they didn't want to deal with the Palestine question anymore, and the ball was thrown into the court of the United Nations. Now, as I read the record, the UN was not attempting to arbitrate.
I don't know if he just didn't take his pills. Hopefully he energizes, but I don't know why Finkelstein is trying to come off as this tired old man when he's this mean, nasty old little, this nasty old little shit. I don't know why he's like, bro, wake up.
Arbitrate or adjudicate rights and wrongs. It was confronting a very practical problem. There were two national communities in Palestine, and there were irreconcilable differences on fundamental questions most importantly, looking at the historic record on the question of immigration, and associate with the question of immigration the question of land.
Holy crap, he actually wrote out his statement. Bro, what the fuck?
The UN Special Committee on Palestine, which came into being before the UN 181 partition resolution, the UN Special Committee, it recommended 2 states in Palestine. There was a minority position represented by Iran, India, Yugoslavia. They supported 1 state, but they believed that if forced to, the 2 communities would figure out some sort of modus vivendi and live together. United Nations General Assembly supported partition between what it called a Jewish state and an Arab state. Now, in my reading of the record, and I understand there's new scholarship on the subject, which I've not read, but so far as I've read the record, there's no clarity on what the United Nations General Assembly meant by a Jewish state and an Arab state, except for the fact that the Jewish state would be demographically, the majority would be Jewish, and the Arab state demographically would be Arab. The UNSCOP, the UN Special Committee on Palestine, it was very clear, and it was reiterated many times, that in recommending 2 states, each state, the Arab state and the Jewish state, would have to guarantee full equality of all citizens with regard to political, civil, and religious matters. Now that does raise the question, if there is absolute full equality of all citizens, both in the Jewish state and the Arab state, with regard to political rights, civil rights, and religious rights, apart from the demographic majority, it's very unclear what it meant to call a state Jewish or call a state Arab. In my view, the partition resolution was the correct decision. I do not believe that the Arab and Jewish communities could, at that point, be made to live together. I disagree with the minority position of India, Iran, and Yugoslavia, and that not being a practical option, 2 states was the only other option. In this regard, I would want to pay tribute to what was probably the most moving speech at the UN General Assembly proceedings by the Soviet Foreign Minister Gromyko. I was very tempted to quote it at length, but I recognized that would be taking too much time. So I asked a young friend, Jamie Stern Weiner, to edit it and just get the essence of what Foreign Minister Gromyko had to say.
I recognized it would take too much time. So now let me go into explaining what I tasked my friend to do. Let me go ahead and give you his name, his background, where he grew up, his mother's maiden name. Like, how does this man say he's going to save time on something and then take like 10 minutes to explain how he saved time? Fuck, man. Like, Finkelstein does not come off as a smart person to me. He just comes off as a geriatric jackass. What do you all want? Why are there like 4 different gangs trying to take this car from me? And I just got run over. Fuck out of here. There we go.
During the last war, Gromyko said, the Jewish people underwent exceptional sorrow and suffering.
Mm-hmm.
Without any exaggeration, this sorrow and suffering are indescribable.
Mm-hmm.
Hundreds of thousands of Jews are wandering about in various countries of Europe in search of means of existence and in search of shelter. The United Nations cannot and must not regard this situation with indifference.
Mm-hmm.
Past experience, particularly during the Second World War, shows that no Western European state was able to provide adequate assistance for the Jewish people in defending its rights and its very existence from the violence of the Hitlerites and their allies. This is an unpleasant fact, but unfortunately, like all other facts, it must be admitted. Gromyko went on to say, in principle, he supports one state, or the Soviet Union supports one state. But, he said, if relations between the Jewish and Arab populations of Palestine proved to be so bad that it would be impossible to reconcile them and to ensure the peaceful coexistence of the Arabs and the Jews, the Soviet Union would support two states. I personally,
Everyone and their fucking mother. From what Finkelstein is saying is that everyone and their mother understood that like the Jews and the Palestinians could not get along. I think that these people are all just paying lip service to um they're all paying lip service to the idea that a one state solution would be amazing, would be phenomenal, but bro, fucking everyone already knew. Everyone was clairvoyant apparently. Everyone already knew that a two-state solution would be um more preferable for two warring factions. The only problem is that not feasible with a group that doesn't want to come to the fucking bargaining table, which is something that he keeps leaving out. Everyone and their mother can like piss in the wind and pray for like a two-state solution. But how are you gonna have a two-state solution for one side that doesn't even want to come to the fucking bargaining table and one that not only is at the bargaining table but has been at the bargaining table?
am not convinced that the two states would have been unsustainable in the
It,
long term
it would have.
if, and this is a big if, the Zionist movement had been faithful to the position it proclaimed during the UNSCOP public hearings. At the time, Ben Gurion testified, quote, I want to express what we mean by a Jewish state. We mean by a Jewish state simply a state where the majority of the people are Jews, not a state where a Jew has in any way any privilege more than anyone else. A Jewish state means a state based on absolute equality of all her citizens and on democracy. Alas, this was not to be.
Alas.
As Professor Morris has written, quote, Zionist ideology and practice were necessarily and elementally expansionist. And then he wrote in another book, Transfer, the euphemism for expulsion, transfer was inevitable and inbuilt into Zionism because it sought to transform a land which was Arab into a Jewish state. And a Jewish state could not have arisen without a major displacement of Arab population. And because this aim automatically produced resistance among the Arabs, which in turn persuaded the Yeshuv's leaders, the Yeshuv being the Jewish community, the Yeshuv's leaders that a hostile Arab majority or large minority could not remain in place if a Jewish state was to arise or safely endure. Or, as Professor Morris retrospectively put it, quote, a removing of a population was needed. Without a population expulsion, a Jewish state would not have been established, unquote. The Arab side rejected outright the partition resolution. I won't play games with that. I know a lot of people try to prove it's not true. It clearly, in my view, is true. The Arab side rejected outright the partition resolution, while
Yeah.
Israeli leaders, acting on the compulsions inevitable and inbuilt into Zionism, found the pretext in the course of the First Arab-Israeli War to expel the indigenous population and expand its borders. I therefore conclude that neither side was committed to the letter of the partition resolution, and both sides aborted it.
Thank you, Norm. Norm asked that you make a lengthy statement in the beginning. Benny, I hope it's okay to call everybody by their first name in the name of camaraderie. Norm has quoted several things you said. Perhaps you can comment broadly on the question of 1948 and maybe respond to the things that Norm said.
Yeah. UNSCOP, the United Nations Special Committee on Palestine, recommended partition. The majority of UNSCOP recommended partition, which was accepted by the UN General Assembly in November 1947, essentially looking back to the Peel Commission in 1937. 10 years earlier, a British commission had looked at the problem of Palestine, the two warring national groups who refused to live together, if you like, or consolidate a unitary state between them. And Peel said there should be two states. That's the principle. The country must be partitioned into two states. This would give a modicum of justice to both sides, if not all their demands, of course. And the United Nations followed suit. The United Nations, UNSCOP, and then the UN General Assembly, representing the will of the international community, said two states is the just solution in this complex situation. The problem was that immediately with the passage of the resolution, the Arab states and the Arabs of Palestine said no, as Norman Finkelstein said. They said no, they rejected the partition idea, the principle of partition, not just the idea of what percentage which side should get, but the principle of partition. They said no to. The Jews should not have any part of Palestine for their sovereign territory. Maybe Jews could live as a minority in Palestine. That also was problematic in the eyes of the Palestinian Arab leadership. Husseini had said only Jews who were there before 1917 could actually get citizenship and continue to live there. But the Arabs rejected partition, and the Arabs of Palestine launched, in very disorganized fashion, war against the resolution, against the implementation of the resolution, against the Jewish community in Palestine. And this was their defeat in that civil war between the two communities while the British were withdrawing from Palestine, led to the Arab invasion, the invasion by the Arab states in May 1948 of the country. Again, basically with the idea of eradicating or preventing the emergence of a Jewish state in line with the United Nations decision and the will of the international community. Norman said that the Zionist enterprise, and he quoted me, meant from the beginning to transfer or expel the Arabs of Palestine, or some of the Arabs of Palestine. And I think he's sort of quoting out of context. The context in which the statements were made that the Jewish state could only emerge if there was a transfer of Arab population was preceded, in the way I wrote it and the way it actually happened, by Arab resistance and hostilities towards the Jewish community. Had the Arabs accepted partition, there would have been a large Arab minority in the Jewish state, which emerged in 47. And in fact, Jewish economists and state builders took into account that there would be a large Arab minority and its needs would be cared for, etc. But this was not to be, because the Arabs attacked. And had they not attacked, perhaps a Jewish state with a large Arab minority could have emerged, but this didn't happen. They went to war, the Jews resisted, and in the course of that war, Arab populations were driven out. Some were expelled, some left because Arab leaders advised them to leave or ordered them to leave. And at the end of the war, Israel said they can't return because they just tried to destroy the Jewish state. And that's the basic reality of what happened in 48. The Jews created a state. The Palestinian Arabs never bothered to even try to create a state before 48 and in the course of the 1948 war. And for that reason, they have no state to this day. The Jews do have a state because they prepared to establish a state, fought for it, and established it, hopefully lastingly.
When you say hostility, in case people are not familiar, there was a full-on war where Arab states invaded, and Israel won that war.
Let me just add to clarify. The war had two parts to it. The first part was the Arab community in Palestine, its militiamen, attacked the Jews from November 1947. In other words, from the day after the UN partition resolution was passed, Arab gunmen were busy shooting up Jews, and that snowballed into a full-scale civil war between the two communities in Palestine. In May 1948, a second stage began in the war in which the Arab states invaded the new state, attacked the new state, and they too were defeated, and thus the state of Israel emerged. In the course of this two-stage war, a vast Palestinian refugee problem occurred.
And so after that, the transfer, the expulsion, the thing that people call the Nakba happened. Muin, could you speak to 1948 and the historical significance of it?
Sure. There's a lot to unpack here. I'll try to limit myself to just a few points. Regarding Zionism and transfer, I think Chaim Weizmann, the head of the World Zionist Organization, had it exactly right when he said that the objective of Zionism is to make Palestine as Jewish as England is English or France is French. In other words, as Norman explained, a Jewish state requires Jewish political, demographic, and territorial supremacy. Without those three elements, the state would be Jewish in name only. And I think what distinguishes Zionism is its insistence, supremacy, and exclusivity. That would be my first point. The second point is, I think what the Soviet foreign minister at the time, Andrei Gromyko, said is exactly right, with one reservation. Gromyko was describing a European savagery unleashed against Europe's Jews. At the time, it wasn't Palestinians or Arabs. The savages and the barbarians were European to the core. It had nothing to do with developments in Palestine or the Middle East. Secondly, at the time that Gromyko was speaking, those Jewish survivors of the Holocaust and others who were in need of safe haven were still overwhelmingly on the European continent and not in Palestine. And I think given the scale of the savagery, I don't think that any one state or country should have borne the responsibility for addressing this crisis. I think it should have been an international responsibility. The Soviet Union could have contributed. Germany certainly could and should have contributed. The United Kingdom and the United States, which slammed their doors shut to the persecuted Jews of Europe as the Nazis were rising to power, they certainly should have played a role. But instead, what passed for the international community at the time decided to partition Palestine. And here I think we need to judge the partition resolution against the realities that obtained at the time. Um, two, Two-thirds of the population of Palestine was Arab. The Yishuv, the Jewish community in Palestine, constituted about one-third of the total population and controlled even less of the land within Palestine. As a preeminent Palestinian historian, Walid al-Khalidi has pointed out, the partition resolution, in giving roughly 55% of Palestine to the Jewish community, and I think 41, 42% to the Arab community, to the Palestinians, did not preserve the position of each community or even favor one community at the expense of the others. Rather, it thoroughly inverted and revolutionized the relationship between the two communities. And as many have written, the Nakba was the inevitable consequence of partition, given the nature of Zionism, given the territorial disposition, given the weakness of the Palestinian community, whose leadership had been largely decimated during a major revolt at the end of the 1930s, given that the Arab states were still very much under French and British influence. The Nakba was inevitable, the inevitable product of the partition resolution. And one last point also about the UN's partition resolution is, yes, formally that is what the international community decided on the 29th of November 1947. It's not a resolution that could ever have gotten through the UN General Assembly today for a very simple reason. It was a very different General Assembly. Most African, most Asian states were not yet independent. Were the resolution to be placed before the international community today, and I find it telling that the minority opinion was led by India, Iran, and Yugoslavia, I think they would have represented the clear majority. So partition, given what we know about Zionism, given that it was entirely predictable what would happen, given the realities on the ground in Palestine, was deeply unjust. And the idea that either the Palestinians or the Arab states could have accepted such a resolution is I think, an illusion. That was in 1947. We saw what happened in 48 and 49. Palestinian society was essentially destroyed. Over 80%, I believe, of Palestinians resident in the territory that became the State of Israel were either expelled or fled, and ultimately were ethnically cleansed, because ethnic cleansing consists of two components. It's not just forcing people into refuge or expelling them, it's just as importantly preventing their return. And here, and Benny Morris has written, I think, an article about Yosef Weitz and the transfer committees. There was a very detailed initiative to prevent their return, and it consisted of razing hundreds of Palestinian villages to the ground, which was systematically implemented, and so on. And so Palestinians became a stateless people. Now, what is the most important reason that no Arab state was established in Palestine? Well, since the 1930s, the Zionist leadership and the Hashemite leadership of Jordan, as has been thoroughly researched and written about by the Israeli-British historian Avi Shlaim, essentially colluded to prevent the establishment of an independent Arab state in Palestine in the late 1940s. There's much more here, but I think those are the key points I would make about 1948.
So the long and short of like their position is the that the Palestinian resistance was inevitable because the encroaching threat like required that response. So they're saying that Zionism would have eventually led to they're saying that the Israeli leadership at the time were all Zionists and that Zionism at one point would push out the Palestinians and destroy them. So the Palestinians were acting preemptively for their own like safety and whatnot. That's what he's saying. That's a stupid fucking argument because that means that you're arguing that the Palestinian people are all clairvoyant and knew what was going to go down. And I think Benny Morrison is one sitting next to Destiny. Benny Morrison is arguing like, well, actually, we have evidence that the Israeli planners not implicitly, were explicitly planning on including the Palestinian locals into their new home, and so the only evidence that the other side has that Finkelstein and his friend have are that, well, the Jews were in a very weak position and the Jews inevitably would have taken over, so they had to do what they had to do in order to defend themselves and their people. And the other side is saying like that's fucking stupid because we have evidence that the Israelis were planning on taking in the Palestinians and there's no evidence to the contrary. I don't like this soothsayer future-telling shit from Finkelstein and his buddy, but I mean, curious to see what evidence they actually have other than the Jewish leaders' hesitancy about having a one-state solution and their evidence for their quote-unquote evidence is that the world at large and the Jewish leaders at the time were all uncomfortable with Palestinians, and the Palestinians could sense this and knew that eventually they would want to kick them all out. Weak evidence, I'd say, at the very least. No evidence, I would say, at the most.
We may talk about Zionism, Britain, UN assemblies, and all the things you mentioned. There's a lot to dig into. So, again, if we can keep it to just one statement moving forward.
Sure.
After Stephen, if you want to go a little longer. Also, we should acknowledge the fact that the speaking speeds of people here are different. Stephen speaks about 10 times faster than me. Stephen, do you want to comment on 1948?
Yeah, I think it's interesting where people choose to start the history. I notice a lot of people like to start at either 47 or 48 because it's the first time where they can clearly point to a catastrophe that occurs on the Arab side that they want to ascribe 100% of the blame to the newly emergent Israeli state to. But I feel like when you have this type of reading of history, it feels like the goal is to moralize everything first and then to pick and choose facts that kind of support the statements of your initial moral statement afterwards. Whenever people are talking about 48 or the establishment of the Arab state, I never hear about the fact that a civil war started in 47. That was largely instigated because of the Arab rejectionism of the 47 partition plan. I never hear about the fact that the majority of the land that was acquired happened by purchases from Jewish organizations of Palestinian Arabs of the Ottoman Empire before the mandatory period in 1920 even started. Funnily enough, King Abdullah of Jordan was quoted as saying, "The Arabs are as prodigal in selling their land as they are in weeping about it." I never hear about the multiple times that Arabs rejected partition, rejected living with Jews, rejected any sort of state that would have even had any sort of Jewish exclusivity. It's funny because it was brought up before that the partition plan was unfair, and that's why the Arabs rejected it, as though they rejected it because it was unfair, because of the amount of land that Jews were given, and not just due to the fact that Jews were given land at all, as though a 30% partition or a 25% partition would have been accepted, when I don't think that was the reality of the circumstances. I feel like most of the other stuff has been said, but I noticed that whenever people talk about 48 or the years preceding 48, I think the worst thing that happens is there's a cherry picking of the facts where basically all of the blame is ascribed to this this built-in idea of Zionism that because of a handful of quotes or because of an ideology, we can say that transfer or population expulsion or the basically the mandate of all of these Arabs being kicked off the land was always going to happen, when I think there's a refusal sometimes as well to acknowledge that regardless of the ideas of some of the Zionist leaders, there is a political, social, and military reality on the ground that they're forced to contend with. And unfortunately, the Arabs, because of their inability to engage in diplomacy and only to use tools of war to try to negotiate everything going on in mandatory Palestine, basically always gave the Jews a reason or an excuse to fight and acquire land through that way, because of their refusal to negotiate on anything else, whether it was the partition plan in 47, whether it was the Lausanne Peace Conference afterwards, where Israel even offered to annex Gaza in 51, where they offered to take in 100,000 refugees. Every single deal is just rejected out of hand because the Arabs don't want a Jewish state anywhere in this region of the world.
I would like to engage Professor Morris. If you don't mind, I'm not with the first name. It's just not my way of relating.
You can just call me Morris. You don't need the professor.
Okay. There's a real problem here. And it's been a problem I've had over many years of reading your work. Apart perhaps from as grandchild, I suspect nobody knows your work better than I do. I've read it many times, not once, not twice, at least 3 times, everything you've written. And the problem is, it's a kind of quicksilver. It's very hard to grasp a point and hold you to it. So we're going to try here to see whether we can hold you to a point. And then you are.
There we go. That's the Finkelstein I know. The little fucking snake viper shitter. That's what I know. That's the one I remember. There he is. It only took him like fucking 30 minutes to wake up, but there he is.
Argue with me the point. I have no problem with that. Your name, please?
Stephen Bonnell.
Okay. Mr. Bonnell referred to cherry picking and handful of quotes. Now,
No.
it's true that when you wrote your first book on the Palestinian refugee question, you only had a few lines on this issue of transfer.
4 pages.
Yeah. In the first book.
In the first book, 4 pages.
Maybe 4. I'm not going to quarrel. My memory's not clear. We're talking about 40 years ago. I read it, but then I read other things by you. Okay. And you were taken to task, if my memory is correct, that you hadn't adequately documented the claims of transfer. Allow me to finish. And I thought that was a reasonable challenge because it was an unusual claim for a mainstream Israeli historian to say, as you did in that first book, that from the very beginning, transfer figured prominently in Zionist thinking. That was an unusual. If you read Anita Shapira, you read Shabtai Tevitt, that was an unusual acknowledgement by you. And then I found it very impressive that in that revised version of your first book, you devoted 25 pages to copiously documenting the salience of transfer in Zionist thinking. And in fact, you used a very provocative and resonant phrase. You said that transfer was inevitable and inbuilt into Zionism. We're not talking about circumstantial factors, a war, Arab hostility. You said it's inevitable and inbuilt into Zionism. Now, as I said, so we won't be accused of cherry picking, those were 25 very densely argued pages. And then in an interview, and I could cite several quotes, but I'll choose one, you said removing a population was needed. Let's look at the words. Without a population expulsion, a Jewish state would not have been established. Now, you're the one, again, I was very surprised when I read your book. Here I'm referring to Righteous Victims. I was very surprised when I came to that page 37, where you wrote that territorial displacement and dispossession was the chief motor of Arab resistance to Zionism. Territorial displacement and dispossession were the chief motor of Arab resistance to Zionism. So, you then went on to say, because the Arab population rationally feared territorial displacement and dispossession, it of course opposed Zionism. That's as normal as Native Americans opposing the Euro-American manifest destiny in the history of our own country, because they understood it would be at their expense. It was inbuilt and inevitable. And so now, for you to come along and say that it all happened just because of the war, that otherwise the Zionists made all these plans for a happy minority to live there, that simply does not gel. It does not cohere. It is not reconcilable with what you yourself have written. It was inevitable and inbuilt. Now, in other situations you've said, that's true, but I think it was a greater good to establish a Jewish state at the expense of the indigenous population. That's another kind of argument. That was Theodore Roosevelt's argument in our own country. He said, we don't want the whole of North America to remain a squalid refuge for these wigwams and teepees. We have to get rid of them and make this a great country. But he didn't deny that it was inbuilt and inevitable.
I think you've made your point. First, I'll take up something that Muin said. He said that the Nakba was inevitable.
As have you.
And predictable. No. I've never said that. It was inevitable and predictable only because the Arabs assaulted the Jewish community and state in 1947-48. Had there been no assault, there probably wouldn't have been a refugee problem. There's no reason for a refugee problem to have occurred, expulsions to have occurred, a dispossession, massive dispossession to occur. These occurred as a result of war. Now, Norman has said that I said that transfer was inbuilt into Zionism in one way or another. And this is certainly true. In order to buy land, they had the Jews bought tracts of land on which some Arabs sometimes lived. Sometimes they bought tracts of land on which there weren't Arab villages, but sometimes they bought land on which there were Arabs. And according to Ottoman law and the British, at least in the initial years of the British mandate, the law said that the people who bought the land could do what they liked with the people who didn't own the land, who were basically squatting on the land, which is the Arab tenant farmers, which is, we're talking about a very small number actually, of Arabs who were displaced as a result of land purchases in the Ottoman period or the Mandate period. But there was dispossession in one way. They didn't possess the land, they didn't own it, but they were removed from the land. And this did happen in Zionism. And there's, if you like, an inevitability in Zionist ideology of buying tracts of land and starting to work it yourself and settle it with your own people and so on. That made sense. But what we're really talking about is what happened in 47-48. And in 47-48, the Arabs started a war. And actually, people pay for their mistakes. And the Palestinians have never actually agreed to pay for their mistakes. They make mistakes, they attack, they suffer as a result. And we see something similar going on today in the Gaza Strip. They do something terrible. They kill 1,200 Jews. They abduct 250 women and children and babies and old people and whatever. And then they start screaming, please save us from what we did because the Jews are counterattacking. And this is what happened then, and this is what's happening now. There's something
Base.
fairly similar in the situation here. Expulsion, and this is important, Norman, you should pay attention to this. You didn't raise that. Expulsion, transfer were never policy of the Zionist movement before 47. It doesn't exist in Zionist platforms of the various political parties, of the Zionist organization, of the Israeli state, of the Jewish agency. Nobody would have actually made it into policy because there was always a large minority, if there were people who wanted it, always a large minority of Jewish politicians and leaders would have said, no, this is immoral, we cannot start a state on the basis of an expulsion. So it was never adopted, and actually was never adopted as policy even in 48, even though Ben Gurion wanted as few Arabs in the course of the war staying in the Jewish state after they attacked it. He didn't want disloyal citizens staying there because they wouldn't have been loyal citizens. But this made sense in the war itself. But the movement itself and its political parties never accepted it. It's true that in 1937, when the British, as part of the proposal by the Peel Commission to divide the country into two states, one Arab, one Jewish, which the Arabs, of course, rejected, Peel also recommended the Arabs, most of the Arabs in the Jewish state to be, should be transferred, because otherwise, if they stayed and were disloyal to the emergent Jewish state, this would cause endless disturbances, warfare, killing, and so on. So Ben Gurion and Weizmann latched onto this proposal by the most famous democracy in the world, the British democracy, when they proposed the idea of transfer side by side with the idea of partition, because it made sense. And they said, well, if the British say so, we should also advocate it, but they never actually tried to pass it as Zionist policy, and they fairly quickly stopped even talking about transfer after 1938.
So just to clarify, what you're saying is that 47 was an offensive war, not a defensive war.
By the Arabs, yes.
By the Arabs.
Yeah.
And you're also saying that there was never a top-down policy of expulsion.
Yes.
Just to clarify the point.
If I understood you correctly, you're making the claim that transfer, expulsion, and so on was in fact a very localized phenomenon, resulting from individual land purchases, and that, if I understand you correctly, you're also making the claim that the idea that a Jewish state requires a removal or overwhelming reduction of the non-Jewish population was...
If the Arabs are attacking you, yes.
But that, let's say, prior to 1947, it would be your claim that the idea that a significant reduction or wholesale removal of the Arab population was not part of Zionist thinking. Well, I think there's two problems with that. I think what you're saying about localized disputes is correct, but I also think that there is a whole literature that demonstrates that transfer was envisioned by Zionist leaders on a much broader scale than simply individual land purchases. In other words, it went way beyond, we need to remove these tenants so that we can farm this land. The idea was, we can't have a state where all these Arabs remain, and we have to get rid of them. And the second, I think, impediment to that view is that long before the UN General Assembly convened to address the question of Palestine, Palestinian and Arab and other leaders as well had been warning ad infinitum that the purpose of the Zionist movement is not just to establish a Jewish state, but to establish an exclusivist Jewish state, and that transfer, forced displacement, was fundamental to that project. And just responding to, sorry, was it
Stephen
Bonnell or
Bonnell?
Donnell?
Yeah.
With a B.
Yeah.
Yeah. You made the point that the problem here is that people don't recognize is that the first and last result for the Arabs is always war. I think there's a problem with that. I think you might do well to recall the 1936 general strike conducted by Palestinians at the beginning of the revolt, which at the time was the longest recorded general strike in history. You may want to consult the book published last year by Laurie Allen, A History of False Hope, which discusses in great detail the consistent engagement by Palestinians, their leaders, their elites, their diplomats, and so on, with all these international committees. If we look at today, the Palestinians are once again going to the International Court of Justice. They're consistently trying to persuade the chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court to do his job. They have launched widespread boycott campaigns. So, of course, the Palestinians have engaged in military resistance. But I think the suggestion that this has always been their first and last resort and that they have somehow spurned civic action, spurned diplomacy, I think really has no basis in reality.
I'll respond to that, and then a question for Norm to take into account, I think, when he answers Benny, because I am curious. Obviously, I have fresher eyes on this, and I'm a newcomer to this arena versus the three of you guys, for sure. A claim that gets brought up a lot has to do with the inevitability of transfer in Zionism, or the idea that as soon as the Jews envisioned a state in Palestine, they knew that it would involve some mass transfer of population, perhaps a mass expulsion. I'm sure we'll talk about Plan Dalet or Plan D at some point. The issue that I run into is, while you can find quotes from leaders, while you can find maybe desires expressed in diaries, I feel like it's hard to truly ever know if there would have been mass transfer in the face of Arab peace, because I feel like every time there was a huge deal on the table that would have had a sizable Jewish and Arab population living together, the Arabs would reject it out of hand. So, for instance, when we say that transfer was inevitable, when we say that Zionists would have never accepted, a sizable Arab population, how do you explain the acceptance of the 47 partition plan that would have had a huge Arab population living in the Jewish state? Is your contention that after the acceptance of that, after the establishment of that state, that Jews would have slowly started to expel all of these Arab citizens from their country? Or how do you explain that in Lausanne a couple years later that Israel was willing to formally annex the Gaza Strip and make 200,000 or so people those citizens? But I'm just curious, how do we get this idea of Zionism always means mass transfer, when there were times, at least early on in the history of Israel and a little bit before it, where Israel would have accepted a state that would have had a massive Arab population in it? Is your idea that they would have just slowly expelled them afterwards, or
is that question to me or Norm?
Or to either one. I'm just curious for the incorporation of the answer. Yeah.
There's some misunderstandings here, so let's try to clarify that. Number one, it was the old historians who would point to the fact, in Professor Morris's terminology, the old historians, what he called not real historians, he called them chroniclers, not real historians. It was the old Israeli historians who denied the centrality of transfer in Zionist thinking. It was then Professor Morris who, contrary to Israel's historian establishment, who said, now you remind me it's 4 pages, but it came at the end of the book. It was
No, it's at the beginning of the book.
Transfer.
Yeah, transfer is dealt with in 4 pages at the beginning of my first book on the Palestinian refugee problem.
It's a fault of my memory, but the point still stands. It was Professor Morris who introduced this idea in what you might call a big way.
Yeah, but I didn't say ever it was the central to the Zionist experiment or experience.
I love that Finkelstein is such a jackass that, like, the dude who wrote the line is right in front of him. He's like, well, you wrote it. So, and then the guy's like, well, this is what I meant when I wrote it. Finkelstein's like, well, you wrote it, so, like, how the fuck is this guy taken seriously? He had a nice little history lesson at the front, but it all comes down to a conspiracy theory that the Jews were, like, built into the Jewish Zionist ideology, or built into the ideology is the desire to expel all Palestinians, and therefore, because this ideology reigns supreme, eventually the Jews are going to expel the Palestinians. So they can't point to policy, they can't point to directives, they can't point to action, but they still sit here so confidently and say, well, of course the Palestinians were justified in fighting the Jewish people first because the Jews would eventually get rid of them. Like, this argument is basically a conspiracy theory. It's like you have to say, well, they hadn't done anything. Well, they hadn't said they were going to do anything. Well, they blah 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 blah, but they would have done it at some point. Like, such a stupid fucking way to think about these issues. And then on top of that, on top of all of that, Norm sits there so smugly and keeps reciting words that this gentleman wrote, and the guy is trying to give him the reason why they were written or the context around those words, and Norm just keeps going, well, you wrote them, so... People that take Norm Finkelstein seriously are a joke.
Saying centrality.
Okay.
I never said it was central. I said it was there.
Okay.
The idea.
It's, by the way, it's okay to respond back and forth. This is great. And also, just a quick question, if I may. You're using quotes from Benny, from Professor Morris. It's also okay to say those quotes do not reflect the full context of the. So, like, if we go back, to quotes we've said in the past, and you've both here have written, the three of you have written on this topic a lot. Is we should be careful and just admit, like, well, yeah, well, that's
just real quick, just to be clear, the contention is that Norm is quoting a part and saying that this was the entire reason for this, whereas Benny's saying it's a part of the.
I'm not quoting a part. I'm quoting 25 pages where Professor Morris was at great pains to document the claim that appeared in those early 4 pages of his book. Now, you say it never became part of the official Zionist platform.
It never became part of policy.
Fine.
It wasn't policy.
We're also asked, well, if this is true, why did that happen? Why did that happen? It's because it's a very simple fact, which everybody understands. Ideology doesn't operate in a vacuum. There are real world practical problems. You can't just take an ideology and superimpose it on a political reality and turn it into a fact. It was the British mandate. There was significant Arab resistance to Zionism. And that resistance was based on the fact, as you said, the fear of territorial displacement and dispossession. So you couldn't very well expect the Zionist movement to come out in neon lights and announce, hey, we're going to be expelling you the first chance we get. That's not realistic.
Okay,
now,
let me respond. Look, you've said it a number of times that the Arabs, from fairly early on in the conflict, from the 1890s or the early 1900s, said the Jews intend to expel us. This doesn't mean that it's true. It means that some Arabs said this, maybe believing it was true, maybe using it as a political instrument to gain support to mobilize Arabs against the Zionist experiment. But the fact is, transfer did not occur before 1947.
True.
And Arabs later said, and since then, have said that the Jews want to build a third temple on the Temple Mount, as if that's what really the mainstream of Zionism has always wanted and always strived for. But this is nonsense. It's something that Husseini used to use as a way to mobilize masses for the cause, using religion as the way to get them to join him. The fact that Arabs said that the Zionists wanted to dispossess us doesn't mean it's true. It just means that some Arabs thought that, maybe said it sincerely and maybe insincerely.
Professor Morris.
Later it became a self-fulfilling prophecy. This is true. Because the Arabs attacked the Jews.
Professor Morris, I read through your stuff. even yesterday, I was looking through Righteous Victim.
Nobody else is allowed to like interrupt Norm. This is not Lex's fault. This is just Norm's fucking behavior. Anybody else interrupts Norm, Norm goes, Excuse me, excuse me, sir, excuse me." But like, Norm interrupts anyone else, and he's like, but Professor, like, bro, shut the hell up, shut up, you fucking old windbag, Jesus Christ, not the fucking Norm Finkelstein's show.
You should read other things.
Although I did come to watch Norm get fucking destroyed, but
You're wasting your time.
No, actually, no. I do read other things, but I don't consider it a waste of time to read you. Not at all.
okay.
You say that this wasn't inherent in Zionism. Now,
Okay.
would you all agree that David Ben Gurion was a Zionist?
A major
What?
Zionist leader.
Right. Would you agree Chaim Weizmann was a Zionist?
Yeah.
Okay. I believe they were. I believe they took their ideology seriously. It was the first generation. Just like with the Bolsheviks, the first generation was committed to an idea. By the 1930s, it was just pure realpolitik. The ideology went out the window. The first generation, I have no doubt about their convictions. Okay? They were Zionists. Transfer was inevitable and inbuilt in Zionism.
You keep repeating the same thing.
Because I have, as I said, Benny, Mr. Morris, I have a problem reconciling what you're saying. It either was incidental or it was deeply entrenched. Here I read, it's deeply entrenched. Two very resonant words, inevitable and inbuilt.
Deeply entrenched, I never wrote.
Well, I'm not sure.
It's something you just invented.
Okay.
But
Inevitable
there.
and inbuilt.
The idea.
Okay.
Let me concede.
Fine.
Let me concede
Fine.
something.
No.
The idea of transfer was there. Israel Zangwill, a British Zionist, talked about it early on in the century. Even Herzl, in some way, talked about transferring population.
According to your 25 pages, everybody talked.
Well, that's like, we keep bringing up this line in the 25 pages and the 4 pages. You know, we're lucky to have Benny in front of us right now. We don't need to go to the quotes. Like, we can legitimately ask, how central is expulsion to Zionism in its early version of Zionism, in whatever Zionism is today, and how much power, influence does Zionism and ideology have in Israel, and like influence the philosophy, the ideology of Zionism have on Israel today?
The Zionist movement up to 1948, Zionist ideology was central to the whole Zionist experience, the whole enterprise up to 1948. And I think Zionist ideology was also important in the first decades of Israel's existence. Slowly, the hold of Zionism, like if you like Bolshevism, held the Soviet Union, gradually faded, and a lot of Israelis today think in terms of individual success and then the capitalism and all sorts of things which have nothing to do with Zionism. But Zionism was very important. But what I'm saying is that the idea of transfer wasn't the core of Zionism. The idea of Zionism was to save the Jews who had been vastly persecuted in Eastern Europe and incidentally in the Arab world, the Muslim world, for centuries, and eventually ending up with the Holocaust. The idea of Zionism was to save the Jewish people by establishing a state or re-establishing a Jewish state on the ancient Jewish homeland, which is something the Arabs today even deny, that there were Jews in Palestine or the land of Israel 2,000 years ago. Arafat famously said, what temple was there on Temple Mount? Maybe it was in Nablus, which of course is nonsense. But they had a strong connection for thousands of years to the land to which they wanted to return, and returned there. They found that on the land lived hundreds of thousands of Arabs, and the question was how to accommodate the vision of a Jewish state in Palestine alongside the existence of these Arab masses living on, who were indigenous, in fact, to the land by that stage. And the idea of partition, because they couldn't live together, because the Arabs didn't want to live together with the Jews. And I think the Jews also didn't want to live together in one state with Arabs in general. The idea of partition was the thing which the Zionists accepted. Okay, we can only get a small part of Palestine. The Arabs will get in 37 most of Palestine. In 1947, the ratios were changed. But we can live side by side with each other in a partitioned Palestine. And this was the essence of it. The idea of transfer was there, but it was never adopted as policy. But in 1947-48, the Arabs attacked, trying to destroy essentially the Zionist enterprise and the emergent Jewish state. And the reaction was transfer in some way, not as policy, but this is what happened on the battlefield, and this is also what Ben Gurion at some point began to want as well.
Right.
Well, one of the first books on this issue I read when I was still in high school, because my late father had it, was the Diaries of Theodor Herzl. And I think, Theodor Herzl, of course, was the founder of the contemporary Zionist movement. And I think if you read that, it's very clear. For Herzl, the model upon which the Zionist movement would proceed, his model was Cecil Rhodes. I think, Rhodes, from what I recall, correct me if I'm wrong, has quite a prominent place in Herzl's diaries. I think Herzl was also corresponding with him and seeking his support. Cecil Rhodes, of course, was the British colonialist after whom the former white minority regime in Rhodesia was named. And Herzl also says explicitly in his diaries that it is essential to remove the existing population from Palestine.
Can I respond to this?
In a moment, please. He says we shall have to spirit the penniless population across the borders and procure employment for them elsewhere or something. And Israel Zangwill, who you mentioned, a land without a people for a people without a land. They knew damn well it wasn't a land without a people. I'll continue, but please go ahead.
Just to this, there is one small diary entry in Herzl's vast
it's 5
diary.
volumes.
Yeah, 5 volumes. There's one paragraph which actually mentions the idea of transfer. There are people who think that Herzl was actually pointing to South America when he was talking about that. The Jews were going to move to Argentina, and then they would try and buy out or buy off or spirit the penniless natives to make way for Jewish settlement. Maybe he wasn't even talking about the Arabs in that particular passage. That's the argument of some people. Maybe he was, but the point is, it has only a 1/100th of a 1% of the diary which is devoted to this subject. It's not a central idea in Herzl's thinking. What Herzl wanted, and this is what's important, not Rhodes. I don't think he was the model. Herzl wanted to create a liberal, democratic, Western state in Palestine for the Jews. That was the idea. Not some imperial enterprise serving some imperial master, which is what Rhodes was about, but to have a Jewish state which was modeled on the Western democracies in Palestine. And this, incidentally, was more or less what Weizmann and Ben Gurion wanted. Ben Gurion was more of a socialist, Weizmann was more of a liberal a Westerner, but they wanted to establish a social democratic or liberal state in Palestine, and they both envisioned through most of the years of their activity that there would be an Arab minority in that Jewish state. It's true that Ben Gurion strived to have as small as possible an Arab minority in the Jewish state, because he knew that if you want a Jewish majority state, that would be necessary. But it's not something which they were willing to translate into actual policy.
Just a quick pause to mention that for people who are not familiar, Theodor Herzl, we're talking about over a century ago. And everything we've been talking about has been mostly 1948 and before.
Yes. Just one clarification on Herzl's diaries. I mean, the other thing that I recall from those diaries is he was very preoccupied with, in fact, getting great power patronage, seeing Palestine, the Jewish state in Palestine, I think his words, an outpost of civilization against barbarism.
Yes.
In other words, very much seeing his project as a proxy for Western imperialism in the Middle East.
Right word. Not proxy. He wanted to establish a Jewish state which would be independent. To get that, he hoped that he would be able to garner support from major imperial powers,
including the Ottoman Sultan, who he tried to cultivate. I just want to respond to a point you made earlier, which was that people expressed their rejection of the partition resolution on the grounds that it gave the majority of Palestine to the Jewish community, which formed only a third. Whereas, in fact, if I understood you correctly, you're saying the Palestinians and the Arabs would have rejected any partition resolution.
Yeah,
I think
a couple things. That one, they would have rejected any. Two, a lot of that land given was in the Negev. It was pretty terrible land at the time. And then three, the land that would have been partitioned to Jews, I think would have been. I think I saw it was like 500,000 it would have been 500,000 Jews, 400,000 Arabs, and I think like 80,000 Bedouin would have been there. So the state would have been divided pretty close.
I think you raise a valid point, because I think the Palestinians did reject the partition of their homeland in principle. And I think the fact that the United Nations General Assembly then awarded the majority of their homeland to the Zionist movement only added insult to injury. I mean, one doesn't have to sympathize with the Palestinians to recognize that they have now been a stateless people for 75 years. Can you name any country, yours for example, or yours, that would be prepared to give 55%, 25%, 10% of your country to the Palestinians? Of course not. And so the issue was not...
Yeah, but the Palestinians weren't a country. They weren't a land. They were ruled by the fucking Sultan of the fucking Ottoman Empire. Or Sultan, but y'all say Sultan. Fucking of the Ottoman Empire. And the Ottoman Empire said, here you go, Brits. Like, I don't understand. I mean, it sucks. It sucks for the Palestinians, but they weren't a country to be dealt with. They were squatters, according to the Sultan. So, I don't understand. I don't understand what this point is of, well, what country would be willing to give up? The country they lived in gave up that land, actually, bro. The fucking Ottoman Empire gave that land to the Brits, so immediately your point falls flat. That country gave up that land. They did it. Oh, well, the Sultan, the Ottoman Empire didn't ask the Palestinians. Tough titty, bro. It's not their land. It never was. Never will be.
The existence of Jews in Palestine. They had been there for centuries. And of course they had ties to Palestine and particularly to Jerusalem and other places, going back centuries, if not millennia. But the idea of establishing an exclusively Jewish state at the expense of those who are already living there, I think it was right to reject that. And I don't think we can look back now, 75 years later, and say, well, you should have accepted losing 55% of your homeland because you ended up losing 78% of it, and the remaining 22% was occupied in 1967. That's not how things work.
Yeah.
And I can imagine an American rejecting giving 10% of the United States to the Palestinians, and if that rejection leads to war and you lose half your country, I doubt that 50 years from now you're going to say, well, maybe I should have accepted that.
Sure. So I like this answer more than what I usually feel like I'm hearing when it comes to the Palestinian rejection of the 47 partition plan. Because sometimes I feel like a weird switch happens to where the Arabs in the area are actually presented as entirely pragmatic people who are simply doing a calculation and saying like, well, we're losing 55% of our land. Jews are only maybe 1/3 of the people here, and we've got 45, and the math doesn't work basically. But it wasn't a math problem. I think, like you said,
it was a matter of principle.
It was an ideology problem.
No, it was a matter of principle.
Yeah, ideologically driven. That they, as a people, have a right to or are entitled to this land that they've never actually had an independent state on, that they've never had even a guarantee of an independent state on, that they've never actually ruled or governed on their own.
That last point is actually not correct, because for all its injustice, the mandate system recognized Palestine as a Class A mandate, which provisionally recognized the independence of that territory.
Of what would emerge from that territory, but not of the Palestinian.
It was provisionally recognized.
But the territory itself was, but not of the Palestinian people to have a right or a guarantee to a government that would emerge.
It was a
from
British mandate of Palestine, not the British mandate of Israel.
The word exclusive, which you keep using,
Yes.
is nonsense. The state which Ben Gurion envisioned would be a Jewish majority state, as they accepted the 1947 partition resolution, as Stephen said. That included 400,000 plus Arabs in a state which would have 500,000 Jews. So the idea of exclusivity wasn't anywhere in the air at all among the Zionist leaders in 47, 48. They wanted a Jewish majority state, but were willing to accept a state which had 40% Arabs. That's one point. The second thing is the Palestinians may have regarded the land of Palestine as their homeland, but so did the Jews. It was the homeland of the Jews as well. The problem was the Arabs were unable and remain to this day unable to recognize that for the Jews, that is their homeland as well. And the problem then is, how do you share this homeland? Either with one binational state or separate this partition into two states. The problem is that the Arabs have always rejected both of these ideas. The homeland belongs to the Jews, as Jews feel, as much as it does, if not more, than for the Arabs.
Jews.
I would say for the Jews. It's the Jewish people's
I would also,
homeland.
real quick, I just want for both of you guys, because I haven't heard these questions answered. I really want these questions to be. I'm just so curious how to make sense of them. It was correctly brought up that I believe that Ben Gurion had. I think Shlomo Ben-Ami describes it as an obsession with getting validation or support from Western states, Great Britain, and then a couple decades later,
That
it becomes
explains the Suez War, the Suez
yeah,
crisis.
exactly, correct. That was one of the major motivators, the idea to work with Britain and France on a military operation
Imperial
against Arabs.
stooge.
But then the question again, I go back to, if that is true, if Ben Gurion, if the early Israel saw themselves as a Western fashion nation, how could we possibly imagine that they would have engaged in the transfer of some 400,000 Arabs after accepting the partition plan? Would that not have completely and totally destroyed their legitimacy in the eyes of the entire Western world? Would
No.
there not have been? How not?
Well, first of all, I think that the Zionist leadership's acceptance of the partition resolution, and I think you may have written about this, that they accepted it because it provided international endorsement of the legitimacy of the principle of Jewish statehood. And they didn't accept the borders. And in fact, later expanded the borders. Second of all,
No, they did
The borders
they did
were
accept the
expanded in
borders.
war.
They accepted the UN partition resolution, borders and all.
They
That's how
accepted- they accepted
it. You
the-
can say that some of the Zionists, deep in their hearts, had the idea that maybe
well,
at some point
including
they
their
would
most,
be able to get
yeah,
more.
including their
they
most senior
accept-
leaders who said
Yes,
so,
but
and
they
I think you've
accepted-
quoted them
but
as saying
they grudgingly accepted what the United Nations,
yes.
the world community,
Yes.
had said, this is what you're
Yes.
going to get.
And second of all, I mean, removing darker
Why dark?
people,
Jews are as dark.
it's
In Israel-
intrinsic. It's
in Israel,
intrinsic.
Jews are as dark as
it's
Arabs.
it's intrinsic to
nonsense.
Western history. So the idea that Americans or Brits or the French would have an issue with, I mean, the French had been doing it in Algeria for decades. The Americans have been doing it in North America for centuries. So how would Israel forcibly displacing Palestinians somehow besmirch Israel in the eyes of the
fact,
West?
Even in the 1944 resolution of the Labor Party, and at the time, even Bertrand Russell was a member of the Labor Party, it endorsed transfer of Arabs out of Palestine. As Muin's pointed out, that was a deeply entrenched idea in Western thinking, that there was nothing, it doesn't in any way contradict or violate or breach any moral values to displace the Palestinian population. Now, I do believe there's a legitimate question. Had it been the case, as you said, Professor Morris, that the Zionists wanted to create a happy state with a Jewish majority, but a large Jewish minority, and if by virtue of immigration, like in our own country, given the current trajectories, non-whites will become the majority population in the United States quite soon. And according to democratic principles, we have to accept that. So if that were the case, I would say maybe there's an argument that had there been mass Jewish immigration, changed the demographic balance in Palestine, and therefore Jews became the majority. You can make an argument in the abstract that the indigenous Arab population should have been accepting of that, just as whites in the United States, quote unquote whites, have to be accepting of the fact that the demographic majority is shifting to non whites in our own country. But that's not what Zionism was about. I did write my doctoral dissertation on Zionism. And I don't want to get now bogged down in abstract ideas. But as I suspect you know, most theorists of nationalism say there are two kinds of nationalism. One is a nationalism based on citizenship. You become a citizen, you're integral to the country. That's sometimes called political nationalism. And then there's another kind of nationalism, and that says the state should not belong to its citizens, it should belong to an ethnic group. Each ethnic group should have its own state. It's usually called the German Romantic idea of nationalism. Zionism is squarely in the German Romantic idea. That was the whole point of Zionism. We don't want to be Bundist.
Crazy that a fucking, in his idea of Zionism, a Zionist government somehow still has a fucking giant political party within it, filled with nothing but Muslim members of the members of parliament are all like majority Muslim. A few of them are. Oh, what was it? How many Palestinians are in the Israeli government? How many members in the Israeli parliament? 120 members. So roughly, what is that? 10 divided by 120. We're not doing quick math here. It's like almost 9%. So almost 1/10 of Israel's government is run by Palestinians, people that have a vested interest in making sure that Palestine's needs are met. I don't think that that is representative of a government hell-bent on only placating and being run by Jews. But hey, what do I know? Norman Finkelstein, right? Dude's a fucking genius, I guess, to some people.
And be one more ethnic minority in Russia. We don't want to become citizens and just become a Jewish people in England or France. We want our own state.
Like the Arab 23 states.
No, wait. Before we get to the Arabs, let's stick to the Jews for a moment, or the Zionists. We want our own state, and in that concept of wanting your own state, the minority at best lives on sufferance, and at worst gets expelled. That's the logic of the German Romantic Zionist idea of a state. That's why they're Zionists. Now, I personally have shied away from using the word Zionism ever since I finished my doctoral dissertation, because
was that painful?
Because as I said, I don't believe it's the operative ideology today.
Okay.
It's like talking about Bolshevism and referring to Khrushchev. I doubt Khrushchev could have spelled Bolshevik. But for the period we're talking about, They were Zionists. They were committed to their exclusive state with a minority living on sufferance or, at worst, expelled. That was their ideology. And I really feel there's a problem with your happy vision of these Western Democrats like Weizmann, and they wanted to live peacefully with the Arabs. Weizmann described the expulsion in 1948 as, quote, the miraculous clearing of the land. That doesn't sound like somebody shedding too many tears at the loss of the indigenous population.
Let me just respond to the word
you're
Let him respond to this.
The unsufferance I don't agree with. I think that's wrong. The Jewish state came into being in 1948. It had a population which was 20% Arab when it came into being. After Arab refugees, many of them had become refugees, but 20% remained in the country. 20% of Israel's population at inception in 1949 was Arab.
80% went missing.
No. I was talking about what remained in Palestine, Israel, after it was created. The 20% who lived in Israel received citizenship and all the rights of Israelis, except, of course, the right to serve in the army, which they didn't want to. They have Supreme Court justices, they have Knesset members. They enjoyed
they lived under emergency laws until 1966.
For a period, sure, they lived under emergency.
So they didn't immediately have citizenship.
No, wait a
This
second.
is just fantasy.
At the beginning, it's not fantasy. At the beginning, they received citizenship, could vote in elections for their own people, and they were put into parliament. But in the first years, the Israeli, the Jewish majority suspected that maybe the Arabs would be disloyal because they had just tried to destroy the Jewish state. Then they dropped the military government and they became fully equal citizens. So if the whole idea was they must have a state without Arabs, this didn't happen in 49, and it didn't happen in the subsequent
Then why did
decades.
you say, Professor Morris?
Yes.
Then why did you say without a population expulsion, a Jewish state would not have been established?
Because you're missing the first section of that paragraph, which was that they were being assaulted by the Arabs. And as a result, a Jewish state could not have come into being unless there had also been an expulsion of the population which was trying to kill them.
Norm, I'm officially forbidding you referencing that again.
I think.
Hold on a second, wait. We responded to it. So the main point you're making, we have to take Benny at his word, is like there was a war, and that's the reason why he made that statement.
I think just one last point on this. I remember reading your book when it first came out, and reading, one incident after the other, and one example after the other, and then getting to the conclusion where you said the Nakba was a product of war, not design. I think we were and I remember reacting almost in shock to that I felt you had mobilized overwhelming evidence that it was a product of design, not war. And I think our discussion today very much reflects, let's say, the dissonance between the evidence and the conclusion. You don't feel that the research that you have conducted and published demonstrates that it was in fact inherent and inbuilt and inevitable. And I think the point that Norm and I are making is that your own historical research, together with that of others, indisputably demonstrates that it does. I think that's a fundamental disagreement we're having here.
Can I actually respond to that? Because this is actually, I think this is emblematic of the entire conversation. I watched a lot of Norm's interviews and conversations in preparation for this, and I hear Norm will say this all over and over and over again. I only deal in facts. I don't deal in hypotheticals. I only deal in facts. I only deal in facts. And that seems to be the case, except for when the facts are completely and totally contrary to the particular point you're trying to push. The idea that Jews would have out of hand rejected any state that had Arabs on it or always had a plan of expulsion is just betrayed by the acceptance of the 47 partition plan.
I don't think you understand politics. Did I just say that there is a chasm that separates your ideology from the limits and constraints imposed by politics and reality? Now, Professor Morris, I suspect, would agree that the Zionist movement from fairly early on was committed to the idea of a Jewish state. I am aware of only one major study, probably written 40 years ago, the binational idea in mandatory Palestine by a woman. I forgot her name now. You'll remember her.
I'm trying.
Yeah. Okay, but you know the book. Yeah, she is the only one who tried to persuasively argue that the Zionist movement was actually, not formally, actually committed to the binational idea. But most historians of the subject agree the Zionist movement was committed to the idea of a Jewish state. Having written my doctoral dissertation on the topic, I was confirmed in that idea because Professor Chomsky, who was my closest friend for about 40 years,
Ugh,
was
not
very
Noam
committed to the
Chomsky.
idea that binationalism was the dominant trend in Zionism. I couldn't go with him there. But Professor Morris, you are aware that until the Biltmore Resolution in 1942, the Zionist movement never declared it was for a Jewish state. Why? Because it was politically impossible at the moment until 1942. There is your ideology, there are your convictions, there are your operative plans, and there's also separately what you say in public. The Zionist movement couldn't say in public, we're expelling all the Arabs. They can't say that. And they couldn't.
Okay, but you have to have some fucking evidence that they were gonna do it, you dick. Jesus, what is the hard part about that? I don't get it. I don't get it. How can he be so cocky and so sure of himself when he has literally no evidence of this? Saying, well, we know they think this. It's so gross. Pretty much he's saying like, well, we know the Jews were going to kick them out. They just couldn't say it out loud because, those Jews couldn't think of a Jewish state or they couldn't think of a Jewish state with brown people in it, with Palestinians in it. Disgusting. So of course the evil, bad, no good Jews planned from the very beginning to kick out all of those poor Palestinians. It's such a fucking disgusting point. It wouldn't come off as being so blatantly racist if he actually had some evidence to back up his point, but he doesn't. This is all theoretical and conjecture. There's nothing that he or his friend have to prove that the Jews were planning on kicking out all the Palestinians. He has nothing to prove that. Is nothing to say that in the moment the Jews were going to kick out the Palestinians. What he does have proof for is that they sure as shit started kicking them out after the Nakba happened. And of course you have evidence of them kicking them out after the Nakba happened. What country on planet Earth would want a populace within itself? Why would they want a populace that has already oriented itself to actively dismantle and destroy your state? Why would any country on the face of the planet be okay with having that populace within themselves? It's insane. And then, contrary to that, like if I was the ruler of a nation and I had a bunch of people within it that were actively seeking to dismantle and destroy that which I ruled over, I would have kicked them all out. But Israel didn't do that. They kicked out the most extreme, and then like the majority of them were still there. Benny Morris just went over the fact that they were citizens of the country and gained rights almost immediately after being integrated into the country. Like Norm and his pal here are pushing this psychotic conspiracy theory that the Jews and net were always planning on kicking out the poor Palestinians and the Nakba was just an excuse they used to finally commit the action they always wanted to do. But they have no evidence of this. None. Zero. Zilch. They have nothing to prove this. Whoa, my God. Shut up.
Couldn't even say we support a Jewish state until 1942.
You're conflating two things. The Zionists wanted a Jewish state,
Yes.
correct? That didn't mean
mean
expulsion of the
that's what I was
Arabs.
gonna say, yeah.
It's not the same thing. They wanted a Jewish state with a Jewish majority, but they were willing, as it turned out, both in 37 and in 47, and subsequently, to have an Arab minority, a large Arab minority.
There was a transfer.
They were willing to have a large Arab minority in the country, and they ended up with a large Arab minority in the country. 20% of the population in 49 was Arab, and it still is.
They ended up for about 5 minutes before they were expelled. They agreed to it until 47, and then they were gone by March 1949.
What happened in between the rejection of the partition plan and the expulsion of the Arabs?
The Arabs launched a war.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, like, it wasn't random. Like, there's a potential that
agree, it
even
wasn't random.
there was.
I totally agree with that.
Yeah,
it
but
was by design.
You can
It
say
wasn't
that.
random.
You can say that, but in this case, the facts betray you. There was no Arab acceptance of anything that would have allowed for a Jewish state to exist.
Of course
Number
not.
one, and number two, I think that it's entirely possible, given how things happen after war, that this exact same conflict could have played out, and an expulsion would have happened without any ideology at play. That there was a people that disagreed on who had territorial rights to a land. There was a massive war afterwards, and then a bunch of their friends invaded after to reinforce the idea that the Jewish people in this case couldn't have a state. There could have been a transfer regardless.
Anything could have been. But that's not what history is about.
History is about Palestinian rejectionism to any peace deal
As I
over
said,
and over and
as
over
I
again.
said, when the ball was thrown into the court of the United Nations, they were faced with a practical problem. And I, for one, am not going to try to adjudicate the rights and wrongs from the beginning. I do not believe that if territorial displacement and dispossession was inherent in the Zionist project, I do not believe it can be a legitimate political enterprise. Now, you might say that's speaking from 2022 or 2020. Where are we
Four
now?
now,
Four
I
now.
think.
Okay. But we have to recognize that from nearly the beginning, for perfectly obvious reasons, having nothing to do with anti-Semitism, anti-Westernism, anti-Europeanism, but because no people that I am aware of would voluntarily cede its country.
Except for all the people that sold land voluntarily.
You can perfectly understand Native American resistance to Euro-colonialism. You can perfectly well understand it without any anti-Europeanism, anti-whiteism, anti-Christianism. They didn't want to cede their country to invaders.
I think
That's completely understandable.
You're minimizing the anti-Semitic element
You minimized
in
it.
Arab
In
nationalism.
all your books, you minimized.
No. The Husseini was an anti-Semite. The leader of the Palestinian national movement in the 30s and 40s was an anti-Semite. This was one of the things which drove him, and also drove him in the end to work in Berlin for Hitler for 4 years, with giving Nazi propaganda to the Arab world, calling on the Arabs to murder the Jews. That's what he did in World War II. That's the leader of the Palestinian Arab national movement.
Why is it?
And he wasn't alone. He wasn't alone.
Professor Morris, why is it that if you read your book, Righteous Victims, you can read it and read it and read it and read it, as I have, you will find barely a word about the Arabs being motivated by anti-Semitism.
It exists, though.
Even I didn't say it doesn't exist.
You agree that it exists.
Hey, I don't know a single non-Jew who doesn't harbor anti-Semitic
We're talking
sentiment.
about Arabs now.
Yeah, but I don't know anybody. That's just part of the human condition. Just
Anti-Semitism.
Yes, I
Husseini
do,
was
I
an
do.
ordinary
And among the
anti-Semite.
Arabs.
So, Professor Morris, here's my problem.
Professor Morris.
I didn't see that in your Righteous Victims. Even when you talked about the first Intifada and you talked about the second Intifada, And you talked about how there was a lot of influence by Hamas, the Islamic movement. You even stated that there was a lot of anti Semitism in those movements. But then you went on to say, but of course, at bottom, it was about the occupation. It wasn't about, and I've read it.
Yeah, but you're moving from different,
No,
different
I'm not moving.
ages, across
I'm
the ages.
about your whole book.
The
Your
occupation
whole book.
began in
I
67, the one you're talking about.
I looked and looked and looked for evidence of this anti-Semitism as being a chief motor of Arab resistance to Zionism. I didn't see it.
You like the?
Did he make that claim?
I don't remember the word chief.
Yeah.
It's one of the elements.
Very binary
It's one of the
thinking when it
elements.
comes to like,
Binary.
analyzing. Yes, binary.
Please don't give me this postmodernism binary. You're the
No, but
one.
you are thinking in terms
You're
of black
the one
and
that
white.
said
He's
the
got- no,
chief
Stephen has a
motor.
point.
Do you have your book
You
here?
talk about
page
black
137.
You talk in black
Excuse
and
me,
white.
page 37.
You're talking in black and white concepts when history is much grayer. Lots of things happen because of lots of reasons, not one or the other. And you don't seem to see that.
Can I ask you a question? Because it's for them to talk to. Just a very quick
Yes.
question. What do you think the ideal solution was on the Arab side from 47? What would they have preferred? And
Well,
what would
they
have
were
happened
explicit.
and then the second one, what would have happened if Jews would have lost the war in 48? What do you think would have happened to the Israeli population, or
Well,
Jewish population?
I think the Palestinians and the Arabs were explicit that they wanted a unitary, I think, federal state, and they made their submissions to UNSCOP. They made their appeals at the UN General Assembly.
What do you mean by unitary and federal? I don't get that. They wanted an Arab state. They wanted Palestine to be an Arab state.
Yes, yes.
Put it simply.
But I
Without
think-
the word unitary, federal, they wanted Palestine
Yes, but
as
I
an
think-
Arab and exclusively Arab state.
No, it wasn't
That's
an
what they wanted.
no, it wasn't an exclusively Arab state. I think we have to distinguish between Palestinian and Arab opposition to a Jewish state in Palestine on the one hand, and Palestinian and Arab attitudes to Jewish existence in Palestine. And there's a fundamental
Well,
difference.
Husseini, the leader of the movement, said that all the Jews who had come since 1917, and that's the majority of the Jews in Palestine in 1947,
Yes.
shouldn't be there.
Well, he
They
did say
shouldn't be citizens and they shouldn't be there.
He did-
PLO
he
charter
did
said
say that.
in
Yes,
64.
they
I'm
said
not
the
going to
same.
deny
Yes,
it. Of
PLO
course,
also said
it's
that.
true. I
Yes.
can understand the sentiment, but I think it's wrong.
But also,
can
you guys
understand
are
that.
the ones.
we agree
you
on
guys,
this. I also
I
think
want
and
to
just to be
answer
clear, you
your
guys earlier,
question.
because you
I
used the
wanna-
words earlier that it was supremacy and exclusivity that the
Well,
Zionist
I
state
want to
was built
answer
on,
your
but-
question. As you Husseini did say that, and I'm sure there was a very substantial body of Palestinian Arab public opinion that endorsed that. But by the same token, I think a unitary Arab state, as you call it, or a Palestinian state, could have been established with arrangements, with guarantees, to ensure the security and rights of both communities. How that would work in detail had been discussed and proposed, but never resolved. And again, I think Jewish fears about what would
a
have
second
happened.
Holocaust. That's what we're
Well,
talking
no,
about.
I think
That was the Jewish fear. A second
that-
Holocaust.
that may well have been the Jewish fear.
Yeah.
It was an unfounded Jewish fear.
It was unfounded?
Of course, it was unfounded.
What about like in
Well,
48 and 56
you
and
really
67?
think that the Palestinians, had they won the war, were going to import ovens and crematoria
I don't know if it
from
would have been
Germany
that bad,
and
but there
and
were
burn- no,
programs
that's-
across in almost every single Arab state where there were Jews living after 48, after
Mhm.
56, after 67. There were always pogroms. There were always flights from Jews from those countries to Israel
There- there-
afterwards.
there
I
were
don't think it would
fli-
be.
I wouldn't say there were always pogroms in every Arab state. I think there was flight of Arab Jews for multiple reasons. In some cases, for precisely the reasons you say. If you look at the Jewish community in Algeria, for example, their flight had virtually nothing to do with the Arab-Israeli conflict. The issue of Algerian Jews was that the French gave them citizenship during their colonial rule of Algeria, and they increasingly became identified with French rule. And when Algeria became independent, and all the French ended up leaving out of fear or out of disappointment or out of whatever, the Jews were identified as French rather than
But
Algerian.
this is a bit of a red herring There were pogroms in the Arab countries, in Bahrain even, where there's almost no Jews. There was a pogrom in 1947. There was a pogrom in Aleppo in 1947.
I'm not denying
there were
any of that history.
Killings of Jews in Iraq and Egypt in 1948, 49.
I'm not denying any.
But the Jews basically fled the Arab states not for multiple reasons. They fled because they felt that the governments there and the societies amid which they had lived for hundreds of years no longer wanted them.
Look, without getting into the details, I think we can both agree that ultimately a clear majority of Arab Jews who believed that after having lived in these countries for centuries, if not millennia, came to the unfortunate conclusion that their situation had become untenable.
Yes.
I also think that we can both agree that this had never been an issue prior to Zionism and the emergence of the State of Israel. Look, I'm not.
Pogroms didn't begin with Zionism in the Arab world.
The issue is the point I raised, which.
Hold on, I'll be right back. I gotta feed my dog. Hold on. All right, I'm back.
Which is whether these communities had ever come to a collective conclusion that their position had become untenable in this part of the world. No, they were Arab Jews.
Well, because untenable meant there was no alternative. But with the creation of Israel, there was an alternative, right? A place where they could go and not be discriminated against or live as second-class citizens or be subject to Arab majority states. I also think it's interesting that, like, when you analyze the flight of Jewish people, and I've seen this, that it wasn't just, I agree with you, it wasn't just a mass expulsion from all the Arab states. There were definitely push factors. There were also pull factors. Now, I don't know how you guys feel about the Nakba, but when the analysis of the Nakba comes in, again, it's back to that, well, that was actually just a top-down expulsion. The retreat of wealthy Arab people in the 30s didn't matter. Any of the messaging from the surrounding Arab states didn't matter. It was just an expulsion from Jewish people or people running from their lives from Jewish massacres. Again, it's like that. I feel like it's a selective critical analysis of the
term Jewish here, because it wasn't the Jews of England or the Soviet Jews.
Well, I say Jewish because prior to 48, saying Israeli, the Yishuv,
I think it's useful to say refer to Zionists before 1948 and Israelis after 48. We don't need to implicate.
Well, sure, but
Jews
the Jewish people that were being attacked in Arab states weren't Zionists; they were just Jews living there, right?
Just comment on that. I was rereading Shlomo Ben Ami's last book, and he does, at the end, discuss at some length the whole issue of the refugee question, bearing on the so-called peace process. And
we're an hour in, and we've generated like 30 minutes of content, which is pretty good. I'm waiting for this guy to get destroyed, and I'm also trying to hunt down this Militech Apogee. We need to go do a bunch of quests for the Padre to get it, though.
1948 and the Arab emigration, if you allow me, let me just quote him. Israel is particularly fond of the awkwardly false symmetry she makes between the Palestinian refugee crisis and the forced emigration of 600,000 Jews from Arab countries following the creation of the State of Israel, as if it were, quote, an unplanned exchange of populations, unquote. And then Mr. Ben-Ami, for those of you who are listening, he was Israel's former foreign minister, and he's an influential historian in his own right. He says, in fact, envoys from the Mossad and the Jewish Agency worked underground in Arab countries and Iran to encourage Jews to go to Israel. More importantly, for many Jews in Arab states, the very possibility of emigrating to Israel was the culmination of millennial aspirations. It represented the consummation of a dream to take part in Israel's resurgence as a nation. So, this idea that they were all expelled after 1948, that's one area, Professor Morris, I defer to expertise. That's one of my credos in life. I don't know the Israeli literature, but as it's been translated in English, there is very little solid scholarship on what happened in 1948 in the Arab countries and which caused the Jews to leave. Arab Jews, right. But Shlomo Ben-Ami knows the literature. He knows the scholarship.
He
He's
also
a
comes
historian.
from Tangiers.
Yeah,
He's from Morocco.
Right. So
You have
he
Abi
knows this.
Schleim from Iraq
And-
has written on this issue.
And they
as
wrote
well.
that the Jews in the Arab lands were not pro-Zionist. They weren't Zionists at all. So, certainly Avi Schleim's family was anti-Zionist.
And Avi Schleim, when he was interviewed by Meron Rappaport on this question, he said, you simply cannot say that the Iraqi Jews were expelled. It's just not true. And he was speaking as an Iraqi Jew who left with his father, family, in 1948.
They were pushed out. They weren't expelled.
Well,
That's probably the right phrase.
I
They
think
were
it's
pushed
I
out.
think it's more complex than that. I think it was
What fucking situation would we ever take the word of one guy to describe what was going on with an entire group of people? If one guy said the fucking Holocaust, if one Jewish person said the Holocaust probably didn't happen, does that mean like the Holocaust didn't happen? Fucking Finkelstein, you idiot. Jesus.
sorry, I interrupted
no,
you.
you're not interrupting me because I don't know. I only know what's been translated into English, and the English literature on the subject is very small and not scholarly. Now, there may be a Hebrew literature, I don't know. But I was surprised that even Shlomo Ben-Ami, a stalwart of his state, fair enough, on this particular point, he called it false symmetry.
No, Stephen is right. There was a pull and a push mechanism in the departure of the Jews from the Arab lands post-48. But there was also a lot of push.
That's indisputable. There was
And on the
Stephen
point of
was saying.
agreement, on this one brief light of agreement, let us wrap up with this topic of history and move on to modern day. But before that, I'm wondering if we could just say a couple of last words on this topic. Stephen?
Yeah, I think that when you look at the behaviors of both parties in the time period around 48, or especially 48 and earlier, there's this assumption that there was this huge built-in mechanism of Zionism and that it was going to be inevitable from the inception of the first Zionist thought, I guess, that appeared in Herzl's mind, that there would be a mass violent population transfer of Arab Palestinians out of what would become the Israeli state. I understand that there are some quotes that we can find that maybe seem to possibly support an idea that looks close to that, but I think when you actually consult the record of what happened, when you look at the populations, the massive populations that Israel was willing to accept within what would become their state borders, their nation borders, I just don't think that the historical record agrees with the idea that Zionists would have just never been okay living alongside Arab Palestinians. But when you look at the other side, Arabs would...
Damn it, my fucking cat just knocked down my trash can. No! did. Look at yourself. Little rat monster. This is the guilty party. The guilty trash knocker over. This is him. For all to see. What is this shit? What do you have on you? What is that? Did you get in the sink? What is this? I don't know what this is. You have something on you that's making your fur stick a little bit. Don't purr right now. You're in trouble. You just got caught knocking over the trash can.
Out of hand reject literally any deal that apportioned any amount of that land for any state relating to Jewish people or the Israeli people. I think it was said even on the other end of the table that Arab Palestinians would have never accepted, the Arabs would have never accepted any Jewish state whatsoever. So it's interesting that on the ideology part, where it's claimed that Zionists are people of exclusion and supremacy and expulsion, we can find that in diary entries, but we can find that expressed in very real terms on the Arab side, I think, in all of their behavior around 48 and earlier, where the goal was the destruction of the Israeli state. It would have been the dispossession of many Jewish people. It probably would have been the expulsion of a lot of them back to Europe. And I think that very clearly plays out in the difference between the actions of the Arabs versus some diary entries of some Jewish leaders.
Benny?
Well, one thing which stood out, and I think Muin made this point, is that the Arabs had nothing to do with the Holocaust, but then the world community forced the Arabs to pay the price for the Holocaust. That's the traditional Arab argument. This is slightly distorting the reality. The Arabs in the 1930s did their utmost to prevent Jewish immigration from Europe and reaching Palestine, which was the only safe haven available, because America, Britain, France, nobody wanted Jews anywhere, and they were being persecuted in Central Europe and eventually would be massacred in large numbers. So the Arab effort to pressure the British to prevent Jews reaching Palestine's safe shores contributed indirectly to the slaughter of many Jews in Europe, because they couldn't get to anywhere and they couldn't get to Palestine because the Arabs were busy attacking Jews in Palestine and attacking the British to make sure they didn't allow Jews to reach this safe haven. That's important. The second thing is, of course, there's no point in belittling the fact that the Palestinian Arab National Movement's leader, Husseini, worked for the Nazis in the 1940s. He got a salary from the German Foreign Ministry. He raised troops.
Yeah, because fucking Tate got arrested again because he sent a stupid text to fucking Aiden Ross. That's why he got fucking arrested again. He trusted a dumb fuck with his like most private information. That's why he got arrested again. You don't know about this? Tate got arrested because he texted. Tate got arrested because the Romanian police, the Romanian government, was under the impression that Tate was going to run and flee Romania and never come back. Their evidence was a text from Tate to Aiden Ross saying, hey, I'm going to be leaving Romania soon. Do you want to do some streams together before I leave? Or rather, I think the literal thing was, I'm going to be leaving Romania soon and never coming back. Do you want to do some streams before then? And why would he send that to Aiden fucking Ross, this dumb fuck who actually read it out live? You know that clip is what tipped them off, right? Aiden Ross, that clip from Aiden is what tipped off the Romanian government to fucking Tate, like, wanting to leave. Aiden Ross is a fucking moron, and then Tate is retarded for trusting that retard with anything. That That shit's not even crazy. That shit's dumb. That was a stupid fucking decision. He could have reached out to anybody, and he could have said it in any way. He could have worded it in any way, shape, or form he would have liked to. And yet he says he's going to be leaving Romania forever, and he sends that to Aiden Ross. He thought he saw a loyal lapdog, which is what Aiden is. Unfortunately, Tate doesn't fucking understand how stupid Aiden is, and divulged some information to him that he probably shouldn't have. Here's what Tate probably thought. Tate probably thought that Aiden wouldn't tell anyone about this. Tate doesn't realize that Aiden's such a dumb shit that he would have read that text out on stream before reading it out to himself in private. Hey man, if Aiden Ross is a fucking loser, that makes Tate a double loser for keeping him around, bro. I'm sorry, that's a big Tate L. That's a big fucking Tate L. And now he's gonna go to jail because they're gonna use that as evidence of him wanting to flee Romania. Now he's probably gonna get held in prison until the trial. That was a big, big fucking Tate L. Tate is a dumb shit. I would never in my life trust anyone so stupid with anything personal. Ever. Ever. There is no one in my life that retarded. And if there was, I'm not telling them fucking shit. Especially if I'm trying to flee a country that is trying to get me on sex trafficking. But yeah, I saw that news, and it irritated me greatly. And it irritated me greatly because not because I particularly like Tate, and not because I particularly like Aiden. I don't like that an individual who like posits himself as being like this genius chess or son of a chess grandmaster would trust such a dumb fuck with something that important. Also, one second, my father is calling me. Alright, we got a recent development. I'm gonna have to end stream soon, so we're gonna have to save this fucking debate for later. Dude, my dad just called me up and he's like, "Hey, there's a guy that I'm purchasing an Xbox from. He's over by where you live. Do you think you can go meet him in this Chick-fil-A parking lot and get it from him?" I was like, "Fuck no." I was like, "Fuck no, I'm not going out there. What the fuck?" He's like, "Oh, but it's a surprise for your brother and I'm trying to make it, I'm with him right now, so I can't really go get it, but this is the only time the guy is like going to be able to give it up." And I was like, "Fuck." So now I'm about to go to a random restaurant, fast food parking lot. I'm going to be bringing my gun with me just in case. Man, I fucking hate this shit. I think the most annoying part is like I can't what do you call it? I can't test the Xbox, right? I can't test the Xbox in the middle of a fucking parking lot. So like how am I going to know if it actually works or not? Ugh. Son of a bitch. Anyway, so I'll be doing that in a little bit. My dog just rolled out behind my chair, so now I can't scoot forward. Oh, did he get up? Yes, he did. Okay. Watch out. Watch your little feet. What? I know, but watch your little feet. Thank you. All right, thank you, buddy. You scoot forward. So yeah, I'll be doing that in a bit. And then I'll end stream there because I've been streaming for I think like 9 hours. Right? 9 or 7 or 8? I don't know. 8 to 9 hours. Probably not because when I get back, it's gonna be like 5 o'clock, and then I'm gonna be making dinner with my wife. And then I gotta go do dinner with a friend. That's right. The cat's screaming. Die, you fucking jackass. Oh, I should probably turn this back up. The fuck did you just call me? So probably not gonna stream when I get back. I think today was a good day of content. We watched like 4 hours worth of shit. I would have liked to have watched the Annihilation of Sneeko, but man, when I saw that debate, I've been waiting for that Lex Friedman video to drop for a hot minute. If I had known it would drop yesterday, I would have watched it yesterday on stream. The only reason is because I hate Finkelstein. Beach. Dude, if you stream like right now, when for me is around 9 p.m., it's perfect time. Yeah, the only problem is I'm not home around this time, bro. Like, usually I'm at work. Or I'm doing shit. I'm only able to stream at this time on my off days. Oh my fucking lord, my father just sent me like, or just messaged me like 4 different things. Oh, Ed, I don't want to go do this. I just want to sit here and be a rat. Die. I don't know what it is with my dad, but he cannot tell me shit ahead of time. Like, Like the other day, he calls me and he tells me like, "Hey, can you come pick me up? I need to go get your stepmother's car checked out at the dealership." I'm like, "Okay, what time do you need me to pick me up? Or what time do you need to be picked up?" He's like, "Oh, right now." I was like, "What the shit? I'm in the middle of hanging out. What the fuck?" He's like, "Yeah, but can you come over? Can you help me out?" I don't know. This is annoying. I need to learn to say no to my father. Teach him to be teach my dad to be self-reliant. Why are you stop screaming? Oh my lord, what the fuck? 7 messages. God damn it. Now this guy... My dad's like, "Oh, by the way, this guy wants cash." Like, my dad sent me the money, and he's like, "Well, can you, like, just get it, like, cashed out?" It's 325. I don't have cash, bro. I'm gonna have to go into the bank to get a 5. Man, I'm gonna have to change out of my comfy little sweats and get into my jeans so that way I can actually have my gun on me. I don't want to put on pants, Ed. I don't want to put on pants. I just want to be in my sweats all day, Ed. You know what vids we need to start watching on this channel? Ed, have you ever heard of Caleb Hammer? Caleb Hammer is this guy on YouTube that does like financial reviews and whatnot. Like he just basically picks apart people's finances and shit. Hold on. It's, I don't know. To me, it's like a source of infinite rage and also humor. Hold on. You've probably seen. I mean, here, we can just watch a clip real quick. Because if I watch a movie, or if I watch a video, I'm going to watch the whole fucking thing.
Small business loan? You don't borrow $20,000 if you're only making 10.
That wasn't
You
way
took
before.
out a loan to be an actor?
My brand, Camille Kali. That is a brand, and that is my business. Absolutely.
I don't need you to make $1 million a year for me to say, okay, you got a business, but you're making 12.
No, it went from not making anything with my business to now I've made a little over 10K.
Why'd you borrow this?
It was offered as, hey, if you have a business, to pay people.
Pay people?
Yeah, do you know what it takes to uphold a brand?
Do I?
Do you?
Do I?
And you pay people to uphold your
once
brand.
I can afford them. I did every single thing myself, 15 hours a day, 7 days a week until I could hire one person. And then I still did the majority of the work. I only did that when I can afford it. I did not go and borrow money to do it. And you don't...
Yeah, but if I can hire...
You can't! Small business loan? You don't...
Basically, all of his content is that. All of his content is that, and I love all of it. Mostly because, like, it makes me rage super hard and really fast. Like, fuck, man. If I... We might come back and watch some Caleb. I might come back and watch a Caleb Hammer video. I wonder if he has a short one, because they're all like an hour long. Fuck. By the way, they're worth what? What the fuck is this? They're all worth watching. It's just like they're so fucking long, bro. I don't have that kind of time. I watched this one already. Oh my god. Oh my god. This bitch made me rage. Here's another one.
You know you can't afford to go out, right? You know you can't afford to buy any designer clothes. You know you cannot afford to go to anything but great clubs. You know you cannot afford to go out to eat at all, right? To be very clear, not a single time.
I'm speechless.
Do you know you cannot afford that though?
I get my lot. I feel like it saves me so much time though, so I can work on my business.
Work on your How many hours a day are you working?
It depends. And now
Average.
I'm doing more things now.
Give me average.
An average?
How many days or hours a day are you working?
5.
Then you don't have time. That's stupid. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. I'm sorry, I'm digging into you, but that's dumb. That's dumb, and you need to know that's dumb. That's why I'm being rough. 5 hours a day? Oh, poor me. I'm working 5 hours a day and I can't cook. What do you mean it saves you time? You know you can't afford to go out, right? You know.
Dude, this shit. Like, bro, have I subscribed on this? I haven't. Okay, I subscribed on my actual for real channel that y'all will never see, but like on my, I just subscribed on this one. But like, oh my god, it's so good. Like, you'll feel, my wife describes it perfectly. You'll feel bad about where you are financially, right? Because like, we have like 35,000 right now for our retirement fund. And we've got like 3K saved up for an emergency, which is like a shit emergency fund. But like my debt total right now is around $25,000 from school and a car. But I'm paying everything like ahead of schedule. And like I'm like, fuck, man, I feel horrible. I'm not that good at like I'm fucked. I'm gonna be fucked for the rest of my life. And then he'll talk to people that are like $140,000 in fucking debt. He'll talk to people that literally cannot pay off a 4K debt. He talked to one guy that's on unemployment and is still going into debt. It makes you feel so much better about how much worse life could be. It's so good. It's so therapeutic to me at least. I don't know if you'll get the same. I don't know if you'll get the same therapeutic, but like you'll be like, man, I fucking suck. Like I don't have $1 billion right now. God damn, I'm a loser. I'm a stupid, dumb jackass, jackass dickhole. And then you see, oh, where'd she go? Where did she go?
What you're doing and paying on this card, is that really?
You see
Never
this?
invented.
Well, a lot of it, specifically.
No.
Community college is great. It's a great resource, but it's also the gen eds in community college are pretty easy to pass. The gen eds specifically.
No. I would have totally passed if math was never invented.
Well, a lot of the world revolves around it.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, I use really only very basic math in my job because things don't get too crazy. So you probably won't use the majority of it, but I mean, we all had to take those classes.
Yeah, I mean, in high school, I had like special help with math, so those transcripts never like scheduled over to college, and the college was basically just like, well, if we don't have your transcripts, then we can't help you with your freaking line-to-line work with your.
She has a 1.8 GPA, by the way. On a 4-point scale, she has a 1.8. Also, so like in America, whenever you're making certain grades, your GPA is on a sliding scale. So like a C over here is kind of like a 2.5 to a 2.8, and then like a 3.0 or above is like B A average, like A's and B's, like 90s and 100s on all your classes and whatnot. She has a 1.8. That's worse than a D average. It's fucking horrendous. By the way, I want you to take a guess at what math she can't pass, by the way. What math do you think she's struggling with? What level of math? It's worse, bro. She's struggling with algebra. Not algebra 2, but algebra. She's struggling with algebra. She failed algebra 3 times. 3 times, Ed. This is her 4th time taking it, and if she fails again, they're going to kick her out of the college. It's just so good. It's so cathartic to look at how shitty other people's lives are sometimes.
Accommodations with college, basically meaning that they can't move over my accommodations
What
from
math
high
was
school.
it?
Algebra.
Okay, well, guys, it's a new year and you need to make your money work for you. You can do exactly what I literally do right now.
So be prepared to do that if you want to move out. I was like, okay. So we started slowly. I took my my phone bill off my credit card because my phone bill was connected to my credit card account. So I took that off. I started paying that. It was 80 something a month because I had an 11 and I upgraded to a 14. So now it's 120. So I'm paying 120 for my phone right now. And then
and $1,400 for rent.
Yeah. And then my car is 126 split into 2 payments.
Wait. What? Are you feeling a bit dirty? Are you a and if it's not for you, go to shop.calebhammer.com/dirty or click the link in the description below.
My insurance company for my car, they're letting me...
Oh, but not a car debt, not car debt.
No,
car insurance.
Yeah, insurance.
It's split 2 payments a month?
Yeah.
What's each?
126.05.
That's disgusting.
So like 256 something, right?
You know, if you know how to properly budget, you would not need to split that in half.
It just seems easier
right
now.
It can be if you budget improperly, but
well, I mean, the math that I'm doing in my head is...
I know, all I'm saying is if you budget properly, you will not have to do that.
Yeah, eventually I won't have to be able to do that. Once I actually get a degree and do the things that I need to do...
How are you going to get a degree, though? It sounds like you are not going to pass the class for the 3rd time. And if you fail the class for the 3rd time, what happens?
They kick me out.
Yeah. And how are you? You said you're transferring to a university. What university is going to accept someone below 2.0 to community college?
No university would do that.
Okay, so you're not transferring to a university.
I have to... What I'm doing is basically just...
This is like University of Phoenix, and they're just trying to scam you for money.
Yeah, I tried that already.
Don't do that. Really? You tried that?
But then I slowly realized that the government would not pay for my school if it wasn't in somewhere.
Go to Full Sail and get a worthless degree. Spend a lot of money.
Yeah, student loans. No.
Checking.
But if I'm not taking a math class currently. So the classes I'm taking, if I bring my GPA up a little bit, then it'll raise and they'll be okay, well, now we can see what other classes we can get you into and see if you do good in those. And if I do good in those, then it'll raise higher, obviously, and then I can get into the 2 math classes. I only need 2 math classes to pass for this semester.
I know, but you fit.
I only need algebra.
What's going to be different this time?
I feel that it's different because I've moved out and I have the independence by myself. It's weird. Living at home, I don't work well when I'm being consistently told what to do. So if I'm by myself in my own apartment, I can do my work
When will you know if you've passed or failed?
by the end of the semester. And
When does the semester end? You're in it right now?
Yeah. I started 2 weeks ago.
When does the semester end?
April 3rd.
Please email us with an update on if you passed or failed.
Bro, like you know when you pass or failed by the time you hit that final exam, dude. You'll know. You'll know if you need to get a 99 in order to pass the class on the final exam, dude, you're not passing. You're not gonna pass the class, bro. It's as easy as that. You don't need till the end of semester to find out. Oh, I hate this bitch so much.
Yeah. Yeah.
Please pass.
I
Hold
will.
on.
I'm really confident in English.
But she
We're confident in English, bro. We're confident in English. However, that's not the class we keep fucking failing, so that class does not fucking matter. We're skipping around a lot because I don't have time to watch the whole thing, but I encourage you. I'm going to send this in the Discord. I encourage you to watch the whole thing because it's so good. Why is this at 15k likes with only 1.4 million subs? How many views does this have? 600. This needs more likes. We need to like this more. Okay, I'm putting this in the general chat. Bow. Bow. All right, there we go. Okay.
is not. You guys are paying for the credit card debt.
Oh, background. So she's got like 4 grand in credit card debt, a little bit higher than that. And mommy and daddy told her don't worry about it, because they knew she wasn't going to be able to pay for it, so they took over it for her. So there's now about $1,528 on the debt. And our boy here, Caleb Hammer, is trying to convince mom and dad to give the debt back to their daughter so that way she can learn to stop doing stupid shit.
Now, my big concern is, especially with what she just said, going and just blowing all the money and financing on some tattoos, is what you're doing.
Oh yeah, she finances tattoos, by the way. She doesn't pay for her tattoos up front, she finances them. I forgot what the interest rate was, but she does her tattoos in payments.
In paying on this card. Is that really helping her? I don't know if she's learned her lesson.
But I'm telling you, I have
Let
the
her
money.
respond.
No, it's not teaching her how to be responsible and how to budget her money better and how to ask herself, do I need this or do I want this? And to do with what you have.
Mm-hmm. Why are you guys paying for it then? Because I think it's like harming her actual future. Not that I want her to have to pay off debt.
Right.
But clearly from what you were just talking about, I don't think it's helping her. So why are we doing it?
Because you love me.
She was doing well with the credit card. She would, put a gas in her car and she would charge it and she'd pay it off and it went really well. She would get the credit card up to.
Like, I feel bad for the parents because, like, you obviously want to love and protect your child, but, like, that has to be balanced with letting your kids suffer a little bit. I remember when I first moved out, my dad was wanting to help with everything, and I had to be the one to tell him, no, 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 I will pay for it. I will deal with this. I will take it on. And it got stressful really fucking fast, but my pride would never allow me to ask my father for help, but I knew the help was always there. But man, because I don't know, because like ingrained in me is like this feeling of like disgust and I feel pathetic when I ask my parents for help. Um, so her just being so nonchalant okay with her mommy and her daddy paying her bills, I don't know, it's just gross to me. I feel like she's just a failure of a human being at this point. Like, if there's an agreement between a parent and a child, like, hey, if you do X, I'll do Y, that's fine. But if you're just like, I'm gonna take on this debt with like no expectations of you, that's like super gross. Like, I borrowed money from my aunt, and my aunt is very stringent about how she doles out cash, and so she had me sign an actual contract saying that I would pay by this amount every day or on this day of the month every month to make sure that I paid her back. And I did do that. I was advanced on my payments. I actually did like two payments a month because I wanted to get out of debt to her. But I don't know. I feel like that's way different than what she's doing, which is just letting mommy pay for like all her fucking bills. Oh, yeah. All right, we
You know,
win.
$200-300, you pay it off, and we're like, wow, you're doing
That's
great with
good,
it.
yeah.
And then I kind of like put it in the back of my mind. And then a few months later, I asked her, oh, how's the credit card doing? And she's like, oh, it's about $4,000. And so my husband said, no.
I love how disgusted he is
So
with her.
That's good.
He took it, and we knew that she couldn't pay it on her own since she had just moved out.
But why not like match it with behavioral changes then? Because she's still going out and blowing a solid 33, maybe close to 40% overall. I'd say closer to like 30% actually of her money on things that
she doesn't need.
She not only does not benefit her at all in any way. It's
Right.
not getting her towards anything. She doesn't have an emergency fund. She's not paying on the credit card. So why didn't we balance that with like, okay, I'm okay with you guys putting money towards it, but why not make it where she has to change behavior in order
Yeah.
to do it? Because again, I don't think we've changed anything here.
No, but no, you know, I think it's a bad thing on the parental part of it.
What? There's a balance left of 1,418.
Yeah.
Would you be open? I hate this. This sucks. Would you be open with just? I think she has to pay off the remaining.
Don't.
I think you have to. I think you need to learn, dude.
That's gonna. You know what that's gonna turn into? You saying that is gonna make the budget that I have in my girl brain go down.
No.
And then
it's your debt.
It is your debt.
But then I'm gonna have. That's another thing that I'm gonna owe. And then if you're saying that I owe,
I'll tell you how the math works.
My budget
with the money that comes in and the money that's left, you have an extra 576. The minimum monthly payment on this is $43. You can easily fit that in your budget. It's on a minimum monthly basis. And then what you're learning.
By the way, don't ever do minimum payment on a credit card. Do like twice the minimum payment, twice or 3 times, bro. Because if you're only doing minimum payment, you're fucking eventually your interest is gonna overshadow the amount of interest that's accruing is gonna overshadow the amount that you're paying off on the minimum. So like when you get a credit card and they say what the minimum payment is, do like 2 to 3 times that, bro. Don't fall for that shit because you'll just be in debt. You'll be owing on that card forever. 2 to 3 times whatever they're asking is how you'll get out of it. But it's also best to just not go into credit card debt unless it's an emergency.
For the first time in your life, is how to sacrifice your finances, be an adult financially, and the extra $350 or so will go towards paying this off, and you'll pay this off within like 6 months or so. A little more than that. Closer to a year.
Where's the money for me though?
No.
No, that's a genuine question. Where's the money for me though?
Nope. Because you're an adult.
I am, yeah.
No. You're in this situation. You will be an adult,
Okay.
and you're actually taking care of yourself. You're learning sacrifice for the first time. You're learning independence because you actually want to be independent, like you said. You're actually taking responsibility for the first time in your life, and that's, trust me, that is taking care of yourself more than any bull. extra things that you're spending on McDonald's and Starbucks. You're actually taking care of yourself and learning valuable lessons for the first time in your life, which sets you up for success in the remaining 60 decades of your life. Hopefully more than that. Let's live a long, healthy life. But remaining, it's not 60, 6 decades, 7 decades. Let's go 8 decades of your life. But that's what that's setting you up for. Money for myself. Those words there is just stems from complete immaturity and lack of sacrifice.
Yeah. But there's always room for not improve. There's always room for like, because the money, the what's the word? The miscellaneous money that I have left that either goes to food, tattoos, vapes, or my own self. Either
vapes.
Yeah.
What?
You know I vape. Don't even start.
Oh God.
Well, first of all, that's double bad. That's financially bad, and that's terrible for your health.
Yeah, we've been through the years of smashing them as my dad finds them, and then they just gave up, and I still use them.
Well, smashing is probably not gonna be what's actually effective to quit, but
no,
I wouldn't also just continue and just allow that to be your future no matter what.
It's
like,
a
I would try to see.
Very hard process to stop. But
no, of course. I am not dismissing that by any means, but I don't.
The money for me, bro. The money for me. Fucking. Bro, fucking. But where's the money for me, dog? There is none. You put yourself in debt. There's none left, bro. There's nothing. There's nothing, my bro. There's nothing. You have no money. You're gonna be broke. You're gonna die. You're gonna die destitute because you won't stop financing fucking stupid tattoos.
In the budget, you can't afford it, and your health-wise cannot afford it. Remember when I said 6, 7, 8 decades? Yeah, we're not gonna get there if we're putting things in our lungs.
I mean, with that, if I have the money, like $10, $20.
You don't.
But I do.
No, not if you want to pay off your credit card when they stop putting money into your credit card.
But
you're scaring me now. This conversation's gone to a place where I'm scared for you.
When I go home today, I feel immaturely. I know I'm being honest. Immaturely, I'm gonna want to take what I have for rent right now out and go get food, and then say to myself, I'm gonna go donate plasma. They're gonna give me $100, and I have that back.
Okay, so instead of saying that to yourself, we say we're an adult, and that's obviously wrong. Oh, I just said it. Well, I just said it for you. Will you listen? Are you open to listening to people?
I am very open to listening to people.
Okay, can you listen to me?
Well, yeah, but whether or not I take the advice
when
I come home.
Why?
Because
you know it's a choice, though.
It is.
You're literally choosing it. So why won't you choose for a better future?
I feel like just like the credit card, I feel like I've got to get hit in the face mentally to understand.
Okay, she needs to get hit in the face mentally. So what I almost beg of you, and I again hate that you have to do it. Please don't put another $1 towards a credit card. I think she needs to learn for the first time in her life how to be responsible.
Yep.
Or else, I think when you guys pay off this credit card, I think in the future she's gonna build the balance all the way back up again, and then
that's totally on her.
Yep. But I think if she doesn't have to take care of this remaining 1,500, I think she will do that. But I think if she has to take care of this remaining 1,500 by sacrificing, I think that'll prevent her from just building up a credit card balance again. Now, to be very clear, when I was your age, I was doing much worse. And then I actually learned. I started to have this conversation. The conversations that I give are the ones that I needed. In a very
she keeps getting close, but she doesn't do it. Unfortunately.
I learn more about personal finances, and I sacrificed everything to get out of the much worse debt. But that's what you need to go through. And I promise, I would love you to be in a better place than I am at 29 now, almost 29 now. And you can do that because you'll have more time on your side by starting early. So just do that now. It's so worth it.
It's the people that I surround myself with.
Okay, well now we're just making excuses.
I'm not making excuses. It's genuinely a problem. It's the people that
she has bad people around her?
Yes.
I'm getting a big,
Yep.
So why do we surround ourselves with people we actively know are bad?
Because we struggle to make friends. So
that's hard.
Imagine being okay with hanging around shit people because you can't make friends. Good Lord. Couldn't be me, bro. I'm not going to be hanging around a bunch of rock stars, drug addicts, and gangbangers because I can't make friends. What a fucking loser. 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 She's a loser. Big L. Big fucking L. Pick up your L, you colored-haired bitch. Fuck you. Get wrecked. Get stomped on, idiot. Bitch, loser. Oh,
Of adulthood.
I'm in
making
my
new
20s
friends.
and I do not have friends. I have friends who I've known since high school.
But they're bad influence.
Very bad influence, yes.
Okay, I'm sorry, and again, this sucks. This is not a I want to do type thing, but it's like if they're a negative impact on your life, even if that means we're a little more lonely for a bit. I know it's another interruption, but you can get $5,000 by listening to the end of this. Right now, if you transfer your portfolio to Mumu, which I personally use,
I'm not transferring my fucking portfolio to Mumu.
there, we can put that towards the cap outside of the $40 minimum monthly payment. So this is a 2-year process if you don't change jobs, if you sacrifice completely, and that scares me because from everything you've said, lack of maturity, lack of responsibility, I don't think you're going to be able to maintain that for 2 years. And I think you're going to beg for mom and dad to pick up the bill. Yes.
They know that at some point, some way, shape, or form, that I'd be able to repay them back at some point whenever I am stable enough and mature
We're
enough.
not gonna live forever.
Well, by the time you're 80,
well,
then
we're
maybe
hoping for a very long time.
by the time.
Here's the thing. She keeps banking. All of her choices are on the idea that one day she'll get it together and she'll be able to pay all the shit that she's done off right now later. But that's not how this works. You don't live tomorrow. You live today. You live only right now. You don't live 5 minutes from now. You live right now. This is where all your choices matter. Like, from the human perception, there is no fucking tomorrow. There is only right now. And for some reason, she keeps saying, well, one day when I make this amount of money, or one day when I blah, 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 or one day when I. There is no one day, dog. You are in today. You are right. That's right, Baba. You are right now, Baba. Oh, he's destroying all the blinds. Oh, Jesus. Oh, ah. You're right now. The dog's getting hyped because I keep slamming my finger into the desk. The dog is now extremely hyped. He's knocking over all the blinds. Think stuff randomly better, but you have to make actions to change the situation. True. Okay, Bubba. Okay, let's get down, yeah? Alright, good boy.
Time you're 80, I'll come to you with
Sure.
$1,000 and you'll be good.
Right.
Add that to your 401k,
Listen,
mom.
You said, why do you roll your eyes at 401k? You want a 401k.
I do want a 401k.
Well, so
I have a
all I'm
401k.
saying is, I mean, what you just said was eventually when I mature and blah blah blah. Enough, you're an adult. You're 2 years into adulthood. Be mature, grow up. It's done. No more being a child.
Yeah, I know.
No, you don't, because you just said when I'm mature enough, I'll pay it back. So no, you don't. No, you don't. Don't lie.
There's always room for improvement.
Always for everyone, but
Yeah.
you're already using the self-justification of when I become mature enough, I'll pay it back. That's unacceptable. Be mature.
I've been surviving for the past 3 months, the 4 months that I've been in my apartment, though,
You
right?
have not. No, you have not. Remember, she's paying the bills, and she's in the backdrop. If an emergency happens, if you can't pay rent, you're relying on her to pay for it. She's paying for your credit card. No, you are not surviving. How many times do we need to have this specific conversation?
Do you think that
It's
I
been like 4
like
times now.
asking them for money, though?
No, I never suggested that. But you're saying you're surviving, but you're not. They're paying for it. I don't think I'm getting through in this conversation.
I am more mature now than I was when I did the 4,000 credit.
And
when
I'm more mature now than I was 3 weeks ago. That's how it works. But don't use it as a preemptive excuse to make things are going to happen. But don't preemptively excuse it. Then you're just allowing yourself to justify it in the future.
I will pay off the credit card, and then if some major instance happens, that credit card will be used for that major instance, and then it'll all come together, it'll be paid off, and once it's paid off, I can come back to you, and you can pat me on the shoulder, it'll be good to go.
I hope so.
Yeah.
But I'm sorry, from everything you've just said in this final, 20 minutes or so, I don't think this conversation's gotten through to you.
No.
I'm really sorry for the conversation you're about to have on the road home. But really stick to your guns, please, because it is for her future.
Yep.
And I've seen too many people who were in her situation at 20, who are now 30, who have been on my show, that are in 20 times worse situations because they never had someone that was able to actually put them in the right place. So please, for her future, I promise. If you put anything extra towards the credit card, if you put anything towards any kind of emergency fund, make sure it's coinciding with her behavioral changes,
Yeah.
properly budgeting, taking our budgeting program. You guys can take our budgeting program together. You can take it with your boyfriend as well. It's all for you guys.
Yeah, we're gonna hold her feet to the fire.
Please do.
I don't want to
Yeah.
burn.
I
Don't
think you need to.
don't burn
Yep.
me.
Yep.
Don't burn my bank either.
When
Do-
I was her age,
Oh God.
and my husband and I worked 2 jobs. My husband worked 3 jobs, and we were still struggling.
Yeah.
Still eating cereal for dinner and ramen
And you nag at me that I'm doing this.
no, that's how you
No,
start
they
out.
were taking care of their stuff without
We
relying
were.
on someone else, correct?
We took care of the bills. We didn't
They
go
took care
out to
of it.
eat. We didn't.
She asked my
They
grandmother.
sacrificed.
She asked my grandmother for $10, $20 here as well. Don't lie.
No, I'm not saying it's completely wrong for you to ask for help. Again, it's with the behavior. It's you're going and spending the money and
Yeah.
then going to someone on bullcrap. That doesn't matter. Sorry, I swear, Mom. I know you were out there, and now I feel like I need to. But,
You're good.
you're going and spending the and expecting
True.
them to go ask for the money. If they went and had to ask for the money, but they were sacrificing on everything, that's a completely different situation. I would be okay with me supporting you, if you were completely buckling down. And you're like, crap, I buckled down. Here's months of proof to do it, and this thing came up, and that's different.
I
We're
had
not
to
doing
learn
that.
myself about credit. I asked a couple questions here and there to her, and then she would explain it to me. And you know how I'm bad at math, so she'd explain it to me, and then I'd be like, okay, I
You're
understand.
deflecting. You're justifying. I'm done with this conversation.
I'm not
do you
justifying.
Have any, do you have any final thoughts?
I do not.
I'm scared for your future. Please get it together.
I'm
and
going to.
I feel.
This has definitely changed my perspective on life and how I deal with
I hope
things.
so because you are not showing that in your language and conversations.
I tend not to make eye contact very easily.
Cool. Thanks to all of our Patreon producers for making this episode possible. If you want to participate in an episode of Financial Audit and you're able to make it to Austin, Texas,
The whole episode is so fucking
you can
good.
also send a link to your friends or family who you think might be good to be on the show. If you have
I have a family member in mind who I think would do very well, or who that needs this show a whole lot. I have to figure out where the fuck my wife is because I have to leave. I have to leave in like 5 minutes. All right, y'all. Thank you all so much for watching. Big appreciate it to Ed and Jones for rolling up. If you like this content, hit subscribe and follow. Super appreciate seeing y'all in the next one. Who the fuck is Box Tricks Oh, I know who that is. Anyway, yeah, but for now, God bless. Have a good one. Check out Caleb Hammer, Doomer Media, and Lex Friedman.